Apparently, there was once a city in the north of Sweden called Corona, but somehow we've all forgotten about it. I'm a police officer working in Kalix, a municipality close to where the lost city of Corona is supposed to have been. At that place, there are no signs of the city, only a dense forest, but certain details related to my own family makes me certain that this place was indeed real. The entire world just forgot about it. I can't imagine how or why, but it's the only conclusion that I've been able to reach. For me, this all started when 2 Romanian blueberry pickers came into my small office to report something that they had found deep in the dense forest. They didn't know enough Swedish or English to explain exactly what it was that they had found, but it was immediately clear to me that it had terrified them completely. From what I understood, it seemed to involve a human corpse. Eventually, after having brought in an interpreter from the town next to mine, it was revealed that they had stumbled upon a dead child, no more than 10 years old. They led me and 2 of my colleagues, followed by an ambulance, to the location where they had found the child. The sun was setting behind a thick mist when we got there. I lit a cigarette while we left the main road and walked into the forest, to where the child was supposed to be. I felt a bit uncomfortable having to deal with a dead child, but I had handled cases like this before. Some car accidents, and didn't feel too affected by it now. It was just another job, or so I thought. The Romanians stopped when we got close and refused to go any further. There was panic in their eyes, more than I expected even given these extreme circumstances. One of my colleagues stayed with them while the rest of us continued. We soon came upon a huge boulder that had been placed there by the ice sheet that covered Europe during the Ice Age. My colleague walked around it, and a few moments later he came running back, pale as if he had seen the devil himself. He bent down and puked right in front of me. He said, "It's on the other side. Dear God." I didn't ask him any questions. I only proceeded to check it out for myself with the medics following behind me. What we found on the other side of the boulder, it wasn't natural. Half the child, a blonde little girl, was fused with the boulder, just as if she had been passing through it as a ghost and then suddenly turned into a human before she had time to exit the rock. Or as my colleagues later remarked, it was as if she had been teleported into the rock. The girl's sorrowful dead gaze into the forest seemed to tell a story of a tragedy unknown to the living. The medics quickly shied away from her eyes in silence, horrified by the fate that she must have suffered. But I couldn't look away. I've never been a religious man, but this experience made me doubt everything that I had believed before. And I don't just mean the bizarre way the poor girl had lost her life, half engulfed by the boulder. There was something else about the girl as well, something that made me feel completely empty inside. And just as if a piece of my own soul was ripped out of me, leaving an empty hole in my heart that quickly filled up with the sorrow that I had never felt before. It was a dreadful feeling, only made worse by the strange fact that a small part of me recognized the girl. I couldn't tell from where. Her face was like the vague memory of a dream recently forgotten. We collected ourselves and started talking, trying to make sense of the situation without any success, while the medics approached the body. I tried to focus on the hard facts while we investigated the scene. The girl was wearing a pink jacket. In one of the pockets, we found an odd-looking flower. Its colors were exotic and resembled the wings of a beetle, and a yellow library card with a text that puzzled us. The Library of Corona, it said. The girl had written her name on the card as well. When I saw it, my world had started spinning. Isabella Lexilis, it said in the girl's childish handwriting. "Isn't that your last name, sir?" my colleague said. It is. I didn't know what to say or think. "Well, do you know her?" I don't know. No, I've never seen her before in my entire life. It must be a coincidence. That's a pretty big coincidence, sir. I didn't respond to that. There's something on the ground as well, one of the medics said. On the blood-stained moss beneath the girl, there was a notebook. It must have fallen out of her hand, the one that was hanging limply above the book. I picked it up and opened it. The pages were covered with small text written with a different handwriting than the girl's. Sir, one of the medics said, we will have to bring some tools to cut her down. Yes, I said absently. Oh, there's one more thing, the medic said. I put the book in a plastic evidence bag. What? There's too much blood. The medic pointed at the ground. What do you mean there's too much blood? I asked. Beneath the boulder, sir, the medic explained. It's impossible for all that blood to come from a child. A moment of silence, and then I said, we will have to come back here with better tools. A day later, we successfully removed the upper body of the girl and brought it back to the morgue where it was examined. We also tried to lift the boulder with the help of a crane, but it wouldn't budge. Instead, we dug a hole under it, but we didn't find any new body parts. All we could do this day was to sample as much of the blood as possible. During the examination of the body, I read the notebook. It contained the story of the city of Corona. I was convinced it was fiction, a deranged story written by the man I thought must have killed the girl, until a few weeks ago when the forensic lab called me. I still have a hard time believing it, but they told me there's no other way. They had tested the DNA of the girl and compared it to mine because of her last name. It was my idea since I didn't want anyone to suspect anything, but we didn't think it would reveal anything. But it did. The 10 or so years old girl, Isabella, was my daughter. I was sure that it wasn't possible. 10 years earlier, I lived with my ex-wife and I never cheated on her, and certainly didn't have any children with her. We stayed together for 5 more years, so I would have known if she had a baby during that time. And yet there was nothing wrong with the test. Below is a transcript of the notebook. I've typed it out here in the hopes that somebody will remember the city of Corona, or someone who might have lived in it. Please contact me if you have any information. This is what was inside the notebook. My name is Helena Fredrickson. 5 years ago, I was a different person. I was younger back then, not just in the ordinary sense, but in spirit too. There was joy in my life and I had hopes and dreams, but that's all gone now. I don't have that much time to write this down, but I'll try and explain what happened to us, to our entire community as well as I can. The event, as we have come to call it, occurred on July 9th, 2013. I was only visiting Corona over the day to take my niece, Isabella, to the grand opening of the Red Grove, the city's new amusement park. It was supposed to be the biggest one in Sweden, and Isabella had begged her parents to go to the grand opening, but neither of them had been able to due to work. So they called me and asked me to do it for them. I was their go-to person for when they needed help with Isabella, the only one they trusted really. How I wish that hadn't been the case now, considering what had happened. We arrived pretty early, a few hours before the opening, so that we wouldn't need to stay in line the whole day to get inside. The weather was amazing. It had rained earlier in the morning, so we had been a bit worried, but when we got to the city, there wasn't a cloud in sight. Isabella couldn't stop talking about how much fun that we would have, and it warmed my heart to see her so happy. It took us a bit longer than expected to get to the amusement park, since one of the main streets had been closed off for a military parade. This didn't bother us that much. It rather increased the feeling of celebration in the air. And to avoid the parade, we had to take a bus to the city center, the Fraser Square, and from there we had to take the subway to the yellow neutral business cluster, the tallest skyscrapers in Sweden. It was possible for us to walk to the Red Grove from there. There were people everywhere. It turned out that a lot of them had taken a ferry down the river that I didn't know about. This meant that we had to stand in line after all. Isabella didn't mind, but I knew she would get hungry soon, and I worried that it would ruin her mood. Luckily though, there was a man selling hot dogs from a cart that he was pushing down the line. I bought a hot dog and a soda for Isabella. Her parents didn't really like when I bought her junk food, but a day like this I thought they would understand. The man was also selling red balloons to the children, so Isabella said she wanted one. I tried to tell her that she would have to carry it around all day and that there would be more balloons inside the amusement park, but she wouldn't listen to me. So reluctantly, I bought her a balloon as well. At this point, no one knew that their entire lives were about to change in a matter of minutes. Isabella accidentally let go of the balloon. I feared that it would make her sad, but it didn't seem to bother her that much. We looked at the balloon as it rose up into the air and drifted away. Soon it was but a red dot against the vast blue sky, and then suddenly it vanished. "Where did it go?" Isabella said. I couldn't explain it, it had just disappeared. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe it popped." But something, an uneasy feeling that I couldn't rationalize, made me doubt that. And then only a few minutes later, strong winds came from every direction. It carried a smell with it that reminded me of something rotten. "Ew," Isabella said as her long white hair was blowing in the wind. "What's that smell?" I held her hand harder. "I don't know," I said. People looked around confused and their joyful voices became concerned. Something was happening, but nobody knew what it was. Sirens echoed in the distance, seemingly coming from the business cluster. "Oh my God," a woman said and pointed towards these skyscrapers. "The top of the building's gone." It wasn't that easy to see, but she was right. The top of the tallest building was gone as if it had been cut off with a knife. Isabella was too short to see it, but she picked up that something wasn't right on everybody's faces and she became worried herself. "I think we need to get away from here," I said, acting completely on instinct. "I don't think it's safe." Isabella teared up. "But the opening, aren't we?" "We'll come back later, sweetheart," I said as I walked away from the crowd with her. One of the ferries were just about to leave, and we quickly stepped aboard. A few others joined us, but most of the people stayed behind in the hopes that everything would be sorted out. Isabella cried, but she wasn't mad. As the ferry slowly drove away from the riverside promenade, a commotion of some kind erupted among the crowd back on land. I couldn't see what was going on, but suddenly, everybody screamed in terror and tried to run towards the water. They were clearly escaping from something, but I couldn't see what it was. All I saw was people stepping on each other while they tried to jump into the river to swim away. It was a horrible sight, and I'm glad that Isabella wasn't tall enough to see over the railing. Next, the sirens from the emergency alert system began blasting its eerie sound of imminent catastrophe. Everybody asked questions no one had answers to. Most people I heard thought that we were under attack, either by terrorists or the Russians. I picked up my phone to call my sister, but there was no signal. I tried with Isabella's phone as well without any luck. I soon discovered that no one had any signal. At the sides of the river that passed through the city, people were looking out their windows trying to get a glimpse of what was going on. But the only thing that they could see that was out of the ordinary was the cut-off building in the yellow neutral business cluster. "Look," Isabella said and pointed at the sky. "I've never seen such a big bird before." An enormous bird-like creature soared high above us. It was pitch black. Although it was impossible to say for sure, it seemed to be just as confused about seeing us as we were seeing it. It circled the city center a few times and then flew away again. The sight of the giant bird, or whatever it truly was, turned our anxious confusion into terror. We still didn't know what had happened. but now we knew that it didn't have anything to do with terrorists or some foreign power. This was something else, something impossible to believe and yet at the same time impossible to deny. The ferry led us off a bit further down the river, close to Fraser Square. People seemed to be in a state of panic, although no one knew what was wrong. Some were packing their cars to escape the city. Others were running somewhere, perhaps to their loved ones. But most people clustered around police officers, city workers, or military personnel from the parade to try and get some information. But they only got the same answer over and over again, yelled at them so that it could be heard over the sirens from the emergency alert system, that nothing was known and that they needed to return to their homes and listen to the radio for more information. How are we supposed to listen to the radio when the power's out? The voice came from an old woman. Look around, there's no power. She was right. Go home and close your windows and wait for the power to come back, a policeman said. We don't know what's going on, but the safest thing to do is to follow the procedure. He was interrupted by something happening a few meters away. The first person who had tried to leave the city, a man on a loud motorcycle, had come back. I was carrying Isabella, comforting her at the same time as I tried to hear what the man on the bike was trying to tell everyone. I pushed through to get closer to him. He walked to the center of the square and climbed up on the foot of the statue of Fraser. Few people believed him, but everybody that had seen the creature in the sky had no doubt that he was telling the truth, however impossible it seemed. There's no way out, the man yelled. The main road's cut off at the edge of the city and there's only jungle. I can't explain it, I'm sorry, but it's true. We're surrounded by a dense, thick jungle and there's no way around it. Then it's true, a policeman whispered to himself next to me. For the love of God, it was all true. I asked him what he meant. At first, he didn't want to acknowledge my question, but when he saw my confusion and tears in my niece's innocent eyes, he turned to me and said quietly, and before we lost contact with the helicopter that was surveilling the parade, the pilot said something that simply didn't make any sense. He was crashing. Something had cut off his rotor blades, and he said that it had all changed somehow. The view had changed. Before he hit the ground, he yelled that he had seen a jungle to the west and an ocean to the east. More and more reports came in, and even though it was impossible to tell rumors from facts, they were all telling the same story. The entire world around the city had been replaced in an instant. The city was the same, but the sky above it wasn't. Eventually, these screaming sirens went silent. The cars stopped beeping their horns and the cacophony of voices died out. An uncanny silence fell over the city. The feeling was beyond unreal. I didn't know what any of this meant. I tried to explain it to my niece, but she was only 5 years old and she couldn't understand. She wanted to go home to her parents and I didn't know what to tell her. She was tired and needed rest, so I went to a hostel nearby and paid for a room. Soon the economy of the city would collapse, but for the first few days in this new unknown world, people still accepted money as payment. What followed was 5 years of unending trials and hardships, a continuous battle for survival with no hope for help or rescue. It started during the first night. The sun, identical to our own yet new and strange, sat due north instead of west and was replaced by unrecognizable stars covering the entire sky. As I looked up at them from the small window in our room, I didn't feel awe, but rather I felt completely lost. The strangest feeling during all these years must have been the paradoxical sensation of familiarity on the streets, mixed with the awareness of total displacement. I think this was partly why people kept close to the city center, to drown themselves in the illusion of being home, even though they knew deep down that they couldn't escape their fate as stranded in the unknown. And then as I leaned out the window, I heard the sounds. People screaming, gunshots, cars driving madly through the streets without anywhere to go, and the occasional odd howling that made my blood run cold. I never saw anything of what happened that night, but it changed the population. More than 2 million people forever. I closed the window and hid behind the bed with Isabella. She wanted to cry for her mother, but I kept my hand over her trembling mouth. The next night was calmer, probably because nobody dared venture outside. During the days, I soon realized the threat didn't come from the unknown jungle outside of the city, but from the people within it. It was impossible to tell how much crimes were committed, but given what I saw with my own eyes, looting, robberies, and even murders, I figured the rate of crime must have gone up by a lot. However, it wasn't total anarchy. The police and the few military units that had been in town for the parade kept some vital order to the community. Since ordinary people didn't have guns, the police and the military wasn't threatened by the average citizen. A leader had stepped forward, the man on the motorcycle, and after a few weeks, everybody seemed to cooperate peacefully. The food that was left in the stores were mostly distributed fairly, and everybody that could work seemed to do it without hesitation, even I. The scientists that had been working at the university at the time of the event couldn't figure out what had happened, but with the help of hundreds of citizens, they managed to build a small nuclear power plant that could return electricity to the city. I mostly helped out with that project. I didn't know anything about nuclear physics, but I did what little I could. It was amazing what we were capable of as a people, and in all my dreadfulness, a feeling of pride grew in my chest. Although our time in this world wasn't simple, far from it. Aside from my personal problem with keeping Isabella healthy and safe, which I succeeded with although she never felt safe, there were 3 major problems that kept growing larger for every week. The first one was the food and water situation. Some people had managed to grow wheat and potatoes in parks and on soccer fields, but it wasn't enough. We were running out of food and water. It did rain from time to time, but very few people felt safe enough to drink the rainwater. To battle this problem and to find solutions to some other problems as well, expeditions were sent out to explore the jungle. These typically ended the same way, that is, with no one coming back. Only once or twice did somebody manage to return to the city, but they weren't themselves anymore. It was as if something in the jungle had captured their souls and let their bodies walk back unscratched. The second problem was nature. It seemed to have spared us the first couple of months, but soon after we got the electricity back, it turned on us. It took a while before I saw it with my own eyes, but seemingly at random, mysterious creatures entered the city. Sometimes they just walked right through it, never to return again. A policewoman, one of the new recruits, told me that she had followed a naked blue child as it solemnly walked into the city and then back out of it again. At other times, indescribable monsters wreaked havoc on the streets, killing as many people as they could before returning to wherever they came from. At one point, and this I actually saw for myself, an enormous centipede, pure white with hundreds of red eyes, suddenly appeared from a manhole. It quickly climbed up against a building, as if it knew exactly what it was doing, and entered one of the windows on the top floor. Next came the screams from the people inside the building. A few escaped, but everybody else inside were ripped to shreds. Only after about 5 minutes did the centipede exit the building from the entrance, its white segmented body stained with blood, and it returned down the manhole. These attacks, as they were called, aroused fear and panic in all of us. Although it didn't happen that often, it happened often enough for everybody to be on edge all the time. The third problem also didn't become noticeable until later. It was a problem of health. There was no pattern to who was affected or not, but some people, probably no more than 1%, got sick. It started out like a fever and slowly progressed with nightmarish mutations randomly hitting the body. Most of these mutations made the victims handicapped and disfigured, but sometimes, very rarely, the victims developed properties that were seemingly beneficial to them. The most extreme case of this that I saw was a young girl who grew a third eye in the middle of her forehead, The iris of the new eye glittered with amazing colors, and the girl claimed that she could use the eye to see other people's emotions. At the beginning of the health crisis, the sick people were treated badly, just as if they had been monsters from the jungle. This treatment only got worse when it was revealed that the creatures from outside never attacked the sick. At one point, a mob gathered at Fraser Square, set on chasing the sick people out of the city. Luckily, this was stopped by the military. In the end, however, the sick people were sent into the jungle. Not to be away with them though, but to make use of their immunity to the nature of this world. This turned into a huge success that eventually solved the food and water problem. They could venture out and explore the surrounding area and return with edible fruits, vegetables, and small mammal-like animals that they hunted. This was a turning point for us. And then luck struck again. All attempts at fishing had failed so far, but all of a sudden there were fish everywhere in the river. And we soon learned that there were different periods for when the fish were out to sea or close to land. However, as soon as they came close to land, mysterious purple thunderstorms that lasted weeks tormented the city. And yet, we survived. Many people didn't, of course, but life was possible. In the end, we prevailed. And during the 5 years that followed, there weren't that many catastrophes, and our focus on survival kept most of our thoughts of home away. Even Isabella thought less and less of her parents as she grew older. Over time, most people got used to the bizarre situation that they had found themselves in back in July of 2013. Many people did commit suicide, yes, but most people chose to live on in this unknown land. And two events, however, changed things. First is what happened to a planned expedition at sea. Hundreds of people, mostly men, decided to venture out into the ocean with one of the luxury cruisers that had been moored next to the city. This was going to be a great adventure and perhaps a way to find some answers to where we had ended up. It inspired all of us, thousands of people, Isabella and I included. We had gathered to watch as the huge boat slowly sailed out. It all felt similar to that day 5 years earlier when we had waited for the amusement park to open. We all stared at the horizon as the boat named Birdo de Espero turned into a small dot against the setting sun. We imagined the amazing adventures they would be on and looked forward to their return. But then something that must have been larger than anything we had seen so far came out of the water and swallowed the boat whole. Some people screamed and others cried. This was a hard blow to the city, just knowing that a creature like that, a being able to eat an entire luxury cruiser in one bite, could exist, deprived many people their hopes of a future. The next event was different. It was a miracle to say the least. It happened only a month after the destruction of Birdo de Espero. A military guard, a young man who had only been 15 at the time of our disappearance from Earth, discovered that when he stood at a certain place at Fraser Square, he could tune into a specific radio station from our old world. The station's name was Synthwave Mix and dedicated most of its broadcasting to that kind of music. Hope returned immediately, but this time the hope was different from the one that we had spent 5 years building up within ourselves. The hope of seeing our loved ones again, the hope to return home. The people at the university investigated the area to try and determine where the radio signals were coming from. They didn't have much success, but soon realized that they emanated from the ground beneath Fraser Square. While the area was investigated by the scientists, ordinary people showed up en masse. They all had radios of different kinds with them, like children carrying stuffed animals to feel safe, hoping to tune into Synthwave Mix and get a taste of their lost home. Of course, the area where the radio station could be heard was too small, and the police had to chase everybody away to give the scientists the room that they needed. A few days later, though, the scientists placed a set of large speakers at the foot of the statue of Fraser and connected them to the receiver they were using to listen in on the radio station. Day and night, the relaxed, somewhat melancholic synthetic music played non-stop to the entire city. People congregated around the statue. They even defied the dangers of the night. This became our city's new tradition. ending the day by going to the statue and sitting down around it. As if in prayer, it became our pilgrimage. This wasn't exactly the music that drew people to the square, but rather its origin. And still, the electronic melody soon turned into a symbol of all of our hopes and desires. From time to time, people would get up and dance, sometimes while crying from a bittersweet joy difficult to explain. Although the thing that made us all go silent and become totally focused was when the host said something. Usually, they only spoke about the music they were broadcasting, completely unaware that an entire city full of people were listening to them almost religiously. But on rare occasions, they talked about the world outside. At those times, it felt like our hearts collectively stopped in anticipation. Would they say something about us, about their efforts to figure out where we had all gone, and how they would bring us back? But there was never any news about us, just as if they had already forgotten about us or never known about us at all. The tragic fate of the city of Corona never came up, yet we never lost faith. It took a long time, and now I'm getting closer to the present day, but eventually, the scientists decided that it would be worthwhile digging a large hole right where the radio waves seemed to sip out of the ground. This was no easy task, and neither was it safe. The work took weeks. Again, we all helped. No one really knew what exactly we were looking for. We only knew that it was something. And when we reached the bottom where the rock was too hard to dig through, a mountain of dirt covered the entire square. Our efforts had been in vain, we discovered. Right beneath the place where the radio waves had been picked up, there was a small hole in the bedrock, and people were asked to back away from it while the scientists investigated it. First, they tried to measure how deep it was. This took some time since it was hard to find a long enough rope, but in the end, it was estimated to be about 700 meters deep. Next, some equipment was sent down tied to the end of the rope, and to everybody's surprise, everything that was sent down was swallowed up by the hole. Of course, no one knew where it went, but we all thought the same thing, that somehow it had returned home. It was a reasonable assumption given that the only thing coming out of the hole, the radio waves, came from Earth. We all rejoiced in this discovery. More experiments were done, and although some questions remained unanswered, the consensus, even among the scientists, was that the hole really was a portal back to our own world. There were two large problems that needed to be solved, though. The first was the safety. Every time somebody tied to the rope disappeared at the bottom of the hole, the rope was cut off, just like the skyscraper 5 years earlier. This meant that it was possible that whoever entered the hole would be cut off as well. However, this problem was solved pretty soon by tying a camera to the rope connected to a screen above ground. It was discovered that the rope was only cut off when pulled back. As long as it wasn't pulled back, the screen still received a signal from the camera. The camera never recorded anything other than darkness on what was assumed to be the other side. But since it continued to work until the rope was pulled back, this didn't seem to be such a big problem. After all, some technical issues were expected under the circumstances. The second problem was that the hole was too small for anybody to fit into. Many attempts were made to widen the hole, but the bedrock seemed to be made out of a stronger material than any of our machines could tear into. This was extremely frustrating. It made us feel like we had reached the finish line only to discover that we were unable to cross it. In the end, one of the scientists said that she wanted to send her 10-year-old son down the hole. He was small enough to fit into it. This was widely debated for quite some time before it was approved. The mother argued that the city of Corona was no place for her son, and that all the evidence suggested the hole was the only way back home. The boy was brave. He knew that he would probably never see his poor mother again, but still went through with it. He was given a walkie-talkie, and after a tear-filled goodbye to his mother, he was sent down the 700 meters deep, pitch-black hole. He was instructed to radio in after he reached the other side, confirming that he was safe. After the rope was pulled back, the mother waited and waited for his son to report. However, he never did. For weeks, the mother sat at the edge of the hole under merciless heat and under pouring rain, calling her son over and over again with her walkie-talkie. No one knew what, if anything, had gone wrong. Since no other radio waves had been picked up other than synthwave mix, it was possible that other radio waves simply could not enter into our world for some reason. Still, the authority deemed the hole too unsafe for anyone else to enter. This didn't change people's minds though. The hole represented the only true hope that we had felt in years. And given all the horrible things in our world that could destroy us at any moment, as easily as it is for us to blow out a candle, the small risk of going through the hole seemed to be more than acceptable. The hole was guarded by the police, but most of the police shared the city's collective opinion that the hole was the only way out, not for many of the adults, but for our children. And now I'm sitting here in the room I paid for 5 years ago writing this down. During the last few weeks, many parents have been sending their children down the hole at night. This world is truly no place for them. Although they could survive, they deserve better. Hence, like many others, I've decided to send Isabella home. When I told her about it, she looked at me with a happiness in her eyes that I hadn't seen since we were transported to this dreadful and godforsaken world. I've been writing this all day now. It's my testimony to what happened to Corona. I will give this notebook to Isabella. I'm sure she'll be able to give it to her father. Somehow I know it in my heart that she will find her way home to her parents. Soon, it'll be dark and I'll bring Isabella to Fraser Square one last time. I'm sorry it took so long. Helena. This episode of Creepscast is brought to you by Wild Grain. Wild Grain is the first ever baked from frozen subscription box for sourdough breads, fresh pastas, and artisanal pastries. Every item bakes from frozen in 25 minutes or less, no thawing required. The team at Wild Grain was gracious enough to send me over a box, and out of all the delicious stuff that was inside, my favorite had to be the olive oil ciabatta bread. When I say that it was my favorite, it was absolutely delicious, and it only took around 20 minutes to bake in my oven. Plus, it left my house smelling amazing as well. And you can now fully customize your Wild Grain box, so you can get any combination of breads, pastas, and pastries that you like. If you want a box of all bread, all pasta, or all pastries, you can have it. Plus, for a limited time, you can get $30 off your first box, plus free croissants in every box, when you go to wildgrain.com/creep to start your subscription. Yeah, you heard me. Free croissants in every box, and $30 off your first box when you go to wildgrain.com/creep. That's wildgrain.com/creep. Or you can use promo code CREEP at checkout. The suicide room. That's what they called room 733. As if I didn't have enough to worry about on my first day as a freshman. We had been assigned to dorm room 734, which it turns out wasn't one of the nice add-on rooms in the South Hall. No, we found ourselves in the older wing of the building on the 7th floor. I wasn't too bummed out though, at least they had honored my request to room with my best friend. Lydia and I had spent most of the morning moving ourselves in. By the time that our resident advisor came by, I was taping up posters and Lydia was reading. "Hey girls, I'm Beth," chirped the bubbly blonde girl as she bounded into our room. "I'll be your RA this year." "Hi," I nodded at her. "Wow, you girls really work fast," she said, taking in our made beds and hung up clothes. Beth picked up a drawing of Cthulhu that Lydia had done over the summer. She turned it sideways, studying it. "Is this the Kraken from Pirates of the Caribbean?" Lydia glared at her over the top of her book. "So anyway," the RA continued, "I know our hall isn't as new as the South Hall, but trust me, there's a lot of history here. This building is almost 60 years old." "Yeah, I can see that," I said, looking around. "The rooms are pretty small." Well, people were smaller in the 50s. Beth shrugged. Really? Lydia said flatly. Yep, really. Beth pursed her lips and just continued to stand there, while the room filled with awkward silence. So, I said, the corner room next to us, 733 is it? It looks a lot bigger than our room. Is anybody assigned to that room, or could we maybe... Oh, you don't want that room, Beth interrupted. There were a couple of suicides in there. A hanging and a jumper, if I remember right. They're not assigning anyone to that room. Anyway, I would just like to remind you that this is an all-girls floor, and guys are not allowed up here after 11. And before we could reply to her, Beth clapped her hands and with a quick, "Well, it was nice meeting you," she skipped out of the room. Lydia dropped her book on the bed and stared out into the hall. I hate her. Did you hear that bomb she dropped? I'm going to call her Dumb Beth. Lydia, seriously. Suicides? Oh, Becca, relax. Every college campus has a few of them. Yeah, but in the same room. Lydia sighed. Really, who cares? It's not our room. Yeah, I guess. I turned to study the little window in our room. Can you imagine climbing out of that tiny window and jumping? You would be alive for at least 5 seconds before you hit the ground. Oh, come on, Becca, can you not? Lydia glanced at the window and visibly shuddered. You know that I hate heights, and just talking about that stuff raises my blood pressure. We could always move into the suicide room, I teased her. That one has a window in each wall. Screw you. Okay, but seriously, think about it. It would take a lot of commitment to squeeze out of that tiny window. Yeah, well, remember, people were apparently smaller back then. Lydia mumbled as she pushed her bed further away from the window. Since Lydia was an outgoing and friendly person, we made friends at lightning speed. There were a lot of parties in those first few weeks, at one of which Lydia inevitably met a guy. I had known the girl since we were in diapers, so I fully anticipated her having a boyfriend by the end of September. His name was Mike, and he wasn't anything special. Just your standard frat pledge douche canoe. After about a month on campus, the novelty of college started wearing off. Lydia and I found our stride, and we spent more weekends studying than drinking. Midterms were coming up in a couple weeks, and I was determined to maintain a 4.0 GPA throughout my freshman year. One night in early October, I was awoken by a loud grinding sound. I sat up in bed and strained to hear it again. Lydia was also wide awake and listening. What the heck was that? She mouthed to me. It wasn't unusual for there to be noise in the hallways since other people came in at all hours of the night. But this sound had definitely come from next door, the corner room. Is that? Yeah, Lydia whispered. That's the window next door. At Lydia's insistence, we kept our window closed at all times. However, there was no mistaking the sound of the window in room 733 being open and closed again at regular intervals. Who's in there? Lydia shrugged. Is somebody messing with us? Is this like an initiation? Lydia raised her eyebrow at me. Initiation to what? Oh, I don't know, college. Maybe they're hazing the freshmen. Who is hazing freshmen? I shrugged. Becca, I love you, but that was stupid. I threw a pillow at her. Well, whoever it is, go tell them to knock it off. Who, me? I'm not risking being thrown out a window. Well, I'm not doing it. I'm an art major, you're a political science major. You go lay down the law. Forget that. Well, then call Dumb Beth. Isn't this the kind of nonsense that she should have to deal with? I'm not calling her. Don't you put that evil on me. Fine, Lydia whispered loudly. Then we'll just have to ignore it. I have class at 7:30, I whispered. Well, then do something. Ugh. I got out of bed and stomped to the door, threw it open dramatically, and went down the hall to pound on the door to room 733, which simply said supply room. "Hey, people are trying to sleep. Please cut it out," I said when there was no answer. "Dude, seriously," I sighed. I stepped back from the door and immediately noticed a problem. Room 733 was padlocked shut from the outside. I hurried back to my room. "What happened?" Lydia asked. "I'm not going anywhere near that room again. It's locked from the outside. I don't know how anybody could get in there." "Oh, so you're saying it's a spooky ghost?" She laughed. "No, I'm saying that there's creepy stuff going inside a room that's called the frickin' suicide room." Lydia scoffed and rolled over to go back to sleep. "You should have been a drama major." We didn't hear the window next door again that night, but the next morning you could clearly see from outside that both windows in the corner room were now wide open. I watched the windows on room 733 for an entire week, but they remained open. Occasionally at night, I thought that I could hear a noise next door like marbles dropping and rolling across the floor. Since it never woke Lydia up, I didn't bother to say anything. One afternoon, I was alone in the dorm editing notes on my laptop. I had my headphones in, but the music wasn't loud enough to cover the noise of someone knocking on the door. "Come in," I said without looking up from the screen. A moment went by and then I heard the knocking again. I jerked my earbuds out and slammed the laptop closed. I turned around. "Come, what the heck?" The door to the hallway was wide open. I had left it open on purpose since Ian, a junior that I was dating, was supposed to be stopping by. I heard the knocking again from behind me and literally jumped out of my chair. It had come from the other side of the room, the closet door. It was the closet that shared a wall with room 733. "Lydia, you're not funny." "Nothing." "Lydia, I swear to God, I'll punch you in the face." Silence. I walked over to the closet door and grasped the handle. "Lydia, you're a what?" Her voice came from the doorway behind me. I let go of the doorknob and stumbled back, wide-eyed. Lydia threw her stuff on the bed and turned to me, crossing her arms. "I'm a what?" "I thought you were hiding in the closet," I said lamely. "What? Why?" Because somebody was knocking on the door." "Jesus, Becca." Lydia rubbed her forehead and walked over to the closet, throwing open the door. There was nothing there but clothes and boxes. She made a swipe of her arm as if to say, "What now?" "I swear." "Becca, there's no one here. I know what I heard." We glared at each other until our little standoff was interrupted by the timely arrival of Ian. He immediately sensed the tension in the room. "Hi ladies, what's new?" I gave my roommate a hostile look. "There's weird stuff going on in that room next door, but that's not new." "Which room, 735 or the empty one?" "The empty one," Lydia emphasized. "Oh, 733, yeah, I'm not surprised. That's the suicide room." "Right, we heard about the deaths." I sat down on my bed. "Yeah, it's pretty messed up. 3 suicides all in one dorm room." "3? Lydia raised her eyebrow. "We were told there were 2. "Oh well, there were a couple people in the 70s and then some guy about 10 years ago. He jumped out of the window." Lydia and I both shuddered. Although she was much worse, we were both terrified of heights. A falling death was about the worst thing that I could think of. "I will admit that 3 suicides in the same dorm room is disturbing," Lydia said in an apologetic tone. "Yeah, I heard there's something in that room," Ian said. "Like what?" "No one knows, but every year someone has a new theory. Usually right around Halloween something gets published in the campus paper. Whatever is in there though, it ain't friendly." "So has anybody ever killed themselves in the neighboring rooms? Like this one?" "Nah, just 733. Honestly, I was surprised when I heard that they were opening the North Hall this year. They told us we were the biggest incoming freshman class in 20 years. I said absent-mindedly. "Yeah, I heard that too. You know, you could request a room change." Ian sat down on the bed next to me and I leaned against his shoulder. "Yeah, but they wouldn't keep us together. Lydia cut in. "Becca and I have been best friends for 15 years. We can't room with other people." "So should we just keep living here next to Satan?" I glanced at the closet door again. Lydia shrugged. "Hey, at least we'll have some stories to tell after graduation. These aren't the kind of stories that I want to tell." A few days later, Lydia began to believe my closet story. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone whispering. I looked over at Lydia, who was already staring at me with wide eyes. She slowly brought a finger to her lips. I listened intently, trying to hear what the voice was saying and where it was coming from, but I couldn't understand every word. I got out of my bed and tiptoed over to Lydia. The whispering was definitely louder over there, but then she shared a wall with room 733. I listened harder. "Never taken mouse of fools." What the hell? Lydia leaned over and put her ear up to the wall. The whispers suddenly stopped and I leaned closer. Suddenly, there was a loud bang from the other side. Lydia immediately recoiled and clutched her ear in pain. Someone was in there. Suddenly, more angry than scared, I again threw open our door and stomped over to the supposedly empty supply room. I banged on the door loudly, not caring who else I woke up at this point. "Are you kidding me?" I yelled at the door. "This isn't funny anymore. Come out of that room." Silence. And then the doorknob started to turn. I don't know what I had expected to happen, but it wasn't that. I backed up so far from the door that I ran into the opposite wall. When the handle had turned all the way down, something started to push from the other side. The door groaned loudly, but the locks held. I held my breath until the pressure on the door subsided and the handle slowly returned to its normal position. I noticed Lydia peeking her head out of our room. She held up her hands as if to say, "What happened?" "Oh, somebody thinks they're funny." I answered her out loud. She shook her head and disappeared back into our room. I knelt down on the floor and brought my head down to the carpet, peering under the door crack. It was the first time that I had seen into the corner room. Room 733 was definitely a supply closet. There were chairs stacked along one wall and bed frames along the other. A few rotting mattresses were piled under one of the windows, and a thick layer of dust covered everything in the room. The windows were absolutely huge, which was something that you couldn't really tell by looking up at the building. They were open as always, and I could definitely see how somebody could easily climb through them to the outside ledge. The room didn't look like it had been disturbed in a couple of decades, which sent a shudder racking through my body. The moonlight, which had been providing enough light to see into the room, suddenly vanished and I only saw pitch black inside. I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust my night vision. I squeezed my eyes shut, and when I opened them, a large yellow eye was looking back at me, only a few inches away from my face on the other side of the door. I screamed and woke up half the dorm. There was no denying that things were escalating. The next morning, Lydia and I put in dorm change requests with resident services and hoped for the best. In the meantime, we agreed to never be alone in our dorm room at night. Either we both spent the night at home or neither of us did. We started spending most nights with our respective boyfriends. I told Ian everything that had happened, and he suggested that maybe I talk to the campus paranormal society. I hesitantly made an appointment, and Lydia and I met with a small, cleanly dressed kid named Craig, and 4 of his colleagues the following Tuesday. We told them everything that we could remember, every incident, no matter how small. Craig and the 4 other members of the paranormal society sat quietly and took notes for half an hour. It wasn't until we finished that anyone spoke. "Is that all?" Craig asked. "Yes," I said slowly. "Would you mind waiting out in the hall for a few minutes so that I may confer with my colleagues?" "Sure." Lydia smiled indulgently and stood up. "Whatever you need." The door had barely shut behind us when Lydia snorted and rolled her eyes. "Let's go." "Go where?" I asked. "Are you serious?" "Lydia, come on, we need help. I am freaking out. We haven't stayed one night in our dorm since Thursday, so this isn't something that we can just brush off." "Okay," she threw her hands up. "Let's hear what they have to say and then we can go over to resident services and check on our move requests." We loitered out in the hallway for another 15 minutes before Craig came out and asked us to come back and take a seat. With all the pomp and circumstances of a meeting of parliament, Craig cleared his throat and made his diagnosis. "What you're dealing with, ladies, is a very angry ghost." "Is that your professional opinion, Craig?" Lydia said. I shot her a look. Yes," he stuttered. "A vengeful spirit." "A spirit?" I asked. I very much doubted that that was what we were dealing with. "Yes," answered one of the not Craigs. "That's ghost to the layperson." "Oh, Jesus Christ," Lydia groaned and rubbed her temples. Mistaking Lydia's frustration with despair, Craig rushed right into his speech. "Don't be afraid, ladies, we're going to take care of you. It's true that spirits can be quite a headache if you don't know how to exorcise them, which is why it's a good thing you came to us. Suicides almost always result in angry ghosts. They need revenge." "Revenge on whom?" I asked. "On other students. Perhaps this particular spirit was bullied into taking his own life, and now seeks to torment others." Listen. We can take care of this for you right away. All we ask is a small donation to the society," Craig continued. "We honestly didn't realize that room was having this much activity. It's really very exciting." "Great, well, thank you for your time," Lydia said as she grabbed my hand and pulled me out of my chair. "Do you want to set something up for this weekend?" Craig asked. "Tell you what, we'll call you." Lydia hurried me out of the room wearing a wary look, and we didn't speak again until we were almost to the admin building. That was a waste of time," she said. "Look, I'm not disagreeing with you, but Becca, tell me you didn't honestly buy into that. So you don't think it's I was having trouble even saying the word. It sounded so ridiculous. A ghost. Well, I don't know, but neither do they. That guy had no idea what the heck he was talking about." I pulled my hood lower over my eyes as we stepped into line at the resident services desk. "Let me put it this way," Lydia continued. "They're playing Ghostbusters and we're living The Exorcist." "Fine," I sighed. "Then what do you want to do? Just keep sleeping at Mike's and Ian's until we get reassigned." "I just want this to end." Lydia crossed her arms and stared straight ahead. We all wanted this to end. Even if living next to that room wasn't scary, it sure was distracting. "All right, well, I mean, we're probably safe during the daylight hours, so as long as we don't spend the nights there, we should be okay. Our room is only ghost adjacent after all, and our new assignments will come through soon." I checked my watch. Crap, it's almost 2. Oh, really? I gotta go. Mike got accepted to Sigma Chi and he's getting initiated today. Oh, yeah, I forgot that he rushed. The girl at the desk waved us forward. I hadn't even realized that we had reached the front of the line. "Hey, let me know what they say," Lydia said as she ran out of the door. The girl at the desk eyed me suspiciously as I approached. "Hi, You're the girl trying to move out of 734 and Riley, aren't you?" She had caught me off guard. "Yeah, one of them. How'd you know?" "Oh, sorry I overheard you. I also saw your file across my desk a few days ago and I gotta ask, why are you looking to transfer rooms exactly?" I was tired, I was beaten down. I didn't have the energy to think of a lie. Because stuff is going on in the empty room next door and it's really freaking us out. Noises, whispers, knocking. The other night I saw someone. You saw someone? Yeah. In room 733. Yeah, I looked under the door. There was definitely someone in there. The girl narrowed her eyes at me for a moment and then nodded for no particular reason. Well, your rooms aren't ready yet, but I pushed them through as a priority. For right now, you're stuck though. There just isn't anywhere else to put you. I sighed. I had figured as much. I'm Alice, she continued. And look, I've actually done a lot of research on the Riley suicides, and I think that I can help you. Or at the very least, offer some insight. Really? I asked hesitantly. Absolutely. I'm in Taylor Hall, room 310. I'll be back to my dorm by 4 today. Thanks. We just came from the Paranormal Society on campus. Say no more. Alice rolled her eyes. Yeah, so I'll definitely see you at 4. Great, Alice said and smiled. I was early to Taylor, but then so was she. I told her a story for the second time that day, and Alice wasn't afraid to interrupt with questions, though her queries didn't betray her thoughts. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair and sighed deeply. I can't believe it, she shook her head. I had always heard rumors, but I honestly doubted that any of it was true. I can assure you everything I've told you is absolutely true. And how is it now, when you're there? We aren't ever there at night, but during the day we've heard scratching on the wall, really quiet whispering, and sometimes we still hear the window opening and closing, in broad daylight. However, every time I look up from the street, the windows to 733 are open. Alice nodded. Well, for the record, I don't think you're in any danger. As much as it sucks, you guys are simply a casualty. You just need to stay out of room 733. I snorted. Are you kidding? I would never go in there. I believe that you believe that. But this thing, whatever it is, it's tricky, manipulative, a liar, and it's smarter than you. I'll try not to be offended by that. You shouldn't be. What do you think it is? Something very old and very evil. I regarded her skeptically and then let my eyes wander around the room. I hadn't really noticed the decor before, but to say Alice had an interest in the occult was an understatement. I can't see any situation where I would be compelled to enter that room. I know, but you have to be prepared that there may come a time when you have to make a decision about entering that room, because what you're dealing with, it's already killed 5 people. 5? I thought that it was 3. Yeah, well, not everyone is inclined to do the level of research that I do. Let's see, there was Ellen Burnham in 1961. She jumped out of the window. She was the very first. And then Tad Collinsworth in 1968. He jumped too. Marissa Grigg in 1975. She hung herself. Erin Murphy in 1979. She jumped. And then Eric Dowston in 1992. He hung himself. 5 suicides. How could the university still let people live in there? They don't, apparently. That's why it's a supply room. And back then, well, every few years, once everybody who would remember had graduated, the room would be reassigned. This was before the internet, you know, when the incoming freshmen were clueless. But after that last one, Eric Dowston, they closed the entire north hall of the 7th floor and built more rooms onto the south hall. So what does it want? Alice shrugged. Chaos, death, souls, who knows? No one even knows what it is. Okay, so what do we know? We know that it's somehow bound to that room, though it seems to have minimal influence just outside of it. We know that everybody who ever died was alone at the time, and we know that it's a trickster. That's what we know. It wasn't enough. Why do you think they do it? I asked quietly. The victims. I nodded. All I know is what's rumored to be in the evidence files. All the suicides were found with pictures of writings that were considered unspeakable at the time. They contained horrible, evil things that would make you physically sick to read or see, they say. And these people, they drew them, they wrote that stuff. Yep, whatever was in that room drove them mad. That's terrifying. Have you guys considered getting somebody to bless the room? Jesus. Oh, well, you'll have a hard time getting him, but perhaps some sort of holy person instead. No, I mean Jesus, you're talking about an exorcism. Alice shrugged. Maybe. The rumor in the 70s was that this all started with a Ouija board game gone wrong in 1961. Really? That stuff's made by Hasbro. Well, not in the 60s it wasn't. Anyway, it's only a rumor. The only person on campus who would know is Tom Moan, an admin. I've tried to talk to him before, but he refuses to see me. Did he go here in 1961? Yes, and he was staying in Riley. We need to talk to him. I need to know what is happening or I won't be able to live the rest of my life as a well-adjusted person. Well, I suppose we can try to chase him down on campus. Can we talk to him tomorrow? We can try. Mr. Moen wouldn't see us that day or the next. We tried to catch him on his lunch hour and then again while he was leaving work, but he got around us every time. It was soon clear that the old man was actively avoiding us. Lydia and I had seen little of each other since we had continued to sleep in other dorms. I went back to our room twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. Usually the other room was silent, but that didn't make me feel better. I could always sense something on the other side of the wall, somehow watching me. It felt like the calm before the storm. The Thursday before Halloween, I came back to the dorm to shower in the evening, much later than I usually did. I had seen Lydia that afternoon and she informed me that she had enough clothes stored at Mike's to last until graduation, so I knew that I would be there alone. I showered down the hall in the safety of the bathrooms and then walked back to my room to change. I was supposed to meet Ian in a half hour to head out to a party, and I wanted to get out of here as quickly as possible. Since the silence was unnerving me, I threw my iPod on the docking station and turned up AC/DC. I got dressed and then stood in front of the mirror to dry my hair. I flipped my head over and blow-dried upside down to try and give my hair some volume. When I flipped my head back up and shut off the blow-dryer, I immediately noticed the silence in the room. But that wasn't all that I noticed. I wasn't in my dorm anymore. Behind me was reflected the dusty bed frames and large open windows of room 733. I spun around in a panic to find that I was actually standing in my own room. I looked back at the mirror to see that 733 still reflected there. A slight movement behind me was all it took to make me run. I grabbed my purse and phone and I fled from my room, slamming the door behind me. On the elevator ride down, I called Alice. "I can't do it anymore," I said when she picked up. "I can't go back in that room again. I can't ever go back." "What happened?" I told her. "Jesus, what do you want to do?" she asked. "I need to talk to someone who knows what's going on. Is Tom Moen the only person we know was here in 1961? Well, the only one that I know of. Maybe we can get him on his way in tomorrow morning. We'll just corner him and refuse to move until he tells us something. He comes in at 6:30 according to the schedule that I have. Do you want to meet me outside the Starbucks in the atrium?" "Yeah, I do. I have a class at 7:30, but I'll blow it off." "Okay, I'll see you then." I wasn't usually much for parties, but I was glad that I was going to one that night. As soon as we got there, I asked Ian to get me a drink. Since I wasn't usually much of a drinker, he gave me a raised eyebrow. I gave him a brief synopsis of what had happened earlier, hoping that he wouldn't think that I was crazy. Ian made me a scotch and coke, and it was the first of many. Around midnight, I went to have a cigarette and I checked my phone. I had a voicemail from Lydia left at 11:04 p.m. "Hey, Becca, listen, I just had a huge fight with Mike. Well, I guess his frat decided that for Halloween, this year all the new brothers had to spend the night in the suicide room, in our dorm. I just can't take it. He knows what's been going on with us and he still agreed to do this. He's now trying to convince me that Sigma Chi is behind all this stuff going on in room 733, because they've been trying to drum up buzz for their Halloween deal. I can't. I hit end and threw my phone in my bag. No wonder Lydia was pissed. This was not good, not good at all. I found Ian inside and asked him to take me home. I was suddenly very stressed, very tired, and very drunk. When the alarm went off at 6 a.m., it took everything that I had to pull myself out of bed. I got dressed in the clothes that I had worn the night before and shuffled my way across campus to the atrium. Alice was already there with a black coffee in hand. I figured you would need this, she laughed. How'd you know? Your text. I texted you last night. Yeah, at about 1, you told me about Sigma Chi. Oh God, yeah. I pushed my sunglasses higher up my nose and pulled my hood lower over my eyes. Those guys are idiots. Remember how I told you that it's crafty? Well, what if the point of messing with you was to make 733 provocative, to seduce people to going inside? Nobody has been in that room for years. Can you imagine how hungry that thing is? Do you think they're really at risk? I asked as I sat down on the steps to the admin building. Yeah, in fact, the only thing they have going for them is that all the previous victims were alone at the time of their death. So it'll be less powerful with all of them in there. Well, theoretically, we would know a lot more if we knew what it was. And we can't know what it is without knowing how it got here. And that is why we need Moen. What time is he supposed to get here? Well, actually 20 minutes ago, Alice said grimly. It was another half an hour before we resigned ourselves to the fact that Mr. Moen had snuck around us as usual. We went to the front office hoping to beg again for an appointment with him anyway. The woman at the admin desk regarded us coldly. Tom isn't coming in today, or any other day for that matter. He quit yesterday. It looks like you won't be harassing him anymore. Okay, we weren't harassing him, I said. We just desperately needed to talk to him. And we still do, added Alice. Well, you won't get any of his personal information from me, she said snidely and walked away. Well, what do we do now? I asked Alice. Without Tom Moen, there's nothing left to do. Alice, I can't go back into that room. Well, then I guess it's good your transfers came through. They did? Yep. I got the notice when I checked my work email this morning. You're going to Morton and Lydia is going to Tinsley. Oh, thank God. Yeah, I thought you'd be happy about that. I also convinced my boss not to assign anybody else to room 734. Thank God again. The only thing is you won't be able to move until Monday. I can last through the weekend, especially now that the end is in sight. I'll have to tell Lydia. I opened my phone to pull up Lydia's number, but my attention was caught by the red 1 badge over the voicemail logo. I hit play and it was the rest of the message from last night. Can't even look at its dumb face anymore, so I'm going to head home. Don't worry about me, I'll be okay. I'm drunk enough to sleep through any BS from next door. I'm just so pissed off right now. I would honestly rather deal with dumb Beth than Michael. My parents must be siblings because I'm that stupid Benson. Let's hang out tomorrow. Love ya. The message ended. Oh no. Alice gave me a questioning look. Lydia spent the night in our dorm. Alice cringed. She's safe though, right? As long as she doesn't go into 733. No, she won't. I thought of the always open large windows of the corner room. If nothing else, the mere thought of those would keep Lydia the heck out of that room. Well, good. Since we have nothing else to do you want to go look for theology books in the library? It's pretty much the only thing open right now. Sure, I shrugged. I didn't have another class until 10. The little old lady who sat behind the library's checkout desk must have been 1,000 years old. Mrs. Stapley's eyes were small and watery and her skin looked like it was melting off of her skull. Still, she was nice and knowledgeable and she sent us in the right direction for the books on demonology, though she gave us a curious look as she did. There wasn't much. We read everything we could, but it either wasn't relevant or wasn't in English. We returned to her desk 30 minutes later. Do you have anything on the occult? The occult, her voice trailed off. Yes, I do. Over there to the left of the reference section. Okay, thanks. Sorry, I'm too hungover to use the Dewey Decimal System, I said. I don't think she likes the look of us, Alice whispered as we walked away. Our look or our subject matter? Probably neither. Within the hour, we were back up at her desk, having struck out again. We could tell that she was getting annoyed as her eyes narrowed suspiciously at us as we approached. Sorry, do you know where we could find something on seances or Ouija boards or... Now listen, girls. Miss Stapley stood up from her desk and looked over her glasses at us. I really hope that this is for class. It is, I said. It's not. Alice answered simultaneously. It's personal research. Oh, research? What kind of research? Look, we're not going to mess with a Ouija board or anything, I said. Good. Miss Stapley smoothed her pleated pants and sat back down. Because I can't have that sort of thing going on here again. Again? Alice latched on. The older woman suddenly looked very uncomfortable and started fidgeting with a stack of books on her desk. We may have something on seances and... Miss Stapley, we're researching what happened in Riley in 1961. Alice interrupted. And also what's been happening there ever since. Well, it's no secret, is it? A student committed suicide in that room. Dreadful, but not unheard of on a university campus. 5 students, I corrected her. But you know that, right? Alice was suddenly talking very fast. Because you sound like you're well versed in this story. Please, tell us how this started and how we might be able to end it. End it? Miss Stapley's voice became quieter but more concentrated. Don't be so arrogant, young lady. You can't end it. And people have always died in that room and they always will. There is no end to it, so you would best stay far away from it. But maybe if we knew how this all started. It started just how you think it did, but everybody that was involved is either very old or very dead by now. Just stay away from that room and concentrate on your studies. I leaned over her desk. Well, I would love to, but they assigned my friend and me to the room next door. Maybe you can forget about all the suicides, but we can't. It won't let us. Oh, young lady, I never forget. Miss Stapley's voice was even quieter now. My friend Ellen was the very first to be killed in that room. She was my very best friend, and not a night goes by that I don't imagine her wiggling out of that tiny window, standing upon the cold ledge in her bare feet, and jumping off the 7th floor of that building. Alice sighed. I'm really sorry, I didn't know. Well, these are old wounds, my dear. Now, girls, I suggest you request a room reassignment immediately. Nobody should be living on the 7th floor of that building, and that's all that I'm going to tell you about it. Alice sighed but resigned herself to a nod. We wouldn't learn anything more here, but still it was quite a breakthrough. At least we had some information now. Alice walked away and I made to follow her, but my feet wouldn't move. Something was bothering me, a small yet poignant word that had been buried in Miss Stapley's story. A word that suddenly seemed very important. Miss Stapley, I asked the tired old woman at the desk. Why did you refer to the windows in 733 as tiny? Because I've seen those windows and they're huge, like 5 feet tall. And dear, you're thinking of the corner room. That's the supply closet. Room 733 is next door to that. No, I stuttered. That's room 734. Yes, well, it is now. When they built the additional rooms onto the South Hall, they moved all the room numbers down. Oh my God. I suddenly felt very hot and very dizzy. That sneaky son of a... Alice whispered next to me, her skin paling. Lydia. We took off across the campus at a dead run, witnessed only by the few bleary-eyed students on their way to morning classes. When Riley finally came into view, I stumbled on the pavement as my blood turned to ice. From our vantage point, we could clearly see the windows of the corner room were closed. The first and only time that I had ever seen that way, and the window to my room was open. We ran into the lobby, pushing past several latte-sipping, Ugg boot-wearing freshmen who had just gotten off the elevator. I hit 7 and watched the doors close more slowly than they had ever before. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. Alice, how did this happen? I don't know. She's been in there all night, Alice, in our room all alone. Alice shook her head but had nothing to say. When the doors finally opened on floor 7, we saw a quiet, deserted hallway. I ran toward my room with Alice right behind me. Rounding the corner, I threw open my door hoping that it wasn't locked, and it wasn't. Lydia looked back at me, and for one breathless moment, a cruel glimmer of hope crossed over her tear-streaked face. But it was too late. The next second, she leaned forward so slightly and she was gone. She screamed the entire way down. Alice ran to the edge where Lydia had just been while I stood motionless. She stuck her head out of the window and looked down just as a different kind of screaming had started from the bottom floor. Alice closed her hand over her mouth and pulled her head back into the room as tears of shock ran down her ghost white face. The screaming from outside got louder as more people saw what remained of my best friend on the cold pavement. I leaned back against the dresser and slumped to the floor. A falling death. Lydia never wanted a falling death. I absent-mindedly picked up one of the pictures that were strewn all over the floor. It was a picture of Lydia's mother. She was dead. I picked up another picture. It was Lydia's baby sister. She was dead too. There were dozens of pictures just like it all over the floor. Lydia had been busy last night. As for the things depicted in them, I cannot tell you. Lydia was a talented artist and I only saw a few before I got sick on the floor next to me. Alice was standing in the doorway yelling something down the hall. I don't know what she was saying because all I could hear was a high-pitched whine in the room. Suddenly, a piece of paper slid out from under the crack in the closet door and glided across the floor toward me. I picked it up and studied it for a moment. This was drawn by Lydia too, but it wasn't like the others. It was a picture of the closet from my exact vantage point. In the drawing, the door was cracked and there was something looking back from the darkness. I put the paper down and studied the closet. The door was cracked open just like the picture. I squinted my eyes and tried to see inside. Just as I had started to distinguish the defined lines of a long face looking back at me, Alice pulled me to my feet. "We need to get out of here," I thought I heard her say. I never went back into that room. My parents moved my things and I spent the rest of the semester in an apartment off campus. I transferred to an out-of-state school for my spring semester and finished my degree there. Every night I dream of Lydia pulling herself through that tiny window, shimmying out onto the cold ledge, standing up and knowing that there was nothing between her body and the terrifying abyss in front of her. I watch her look down 7 stories to the black pavement below and realize, though not accept, her terrible fate. I see the blind horror cross her familiar features. I hear her wildly pounding heart, desperately trying to race through every beat of the life she should have lived, and knowing that it has only mere seconds. I watch her look back at me and I watch her fall. It's been 9 years since that night, and every fall semester for 9 years I've called resident services to see which dorms are open for new student assignments. Riley is always open, The 7th floor is closed. This year, life and work got in the way and I called much later than usual. I was put on hold immediately. Resident services, a man finally answered. Were you the one asking about open rooms in Riley? Yeah, that's me. We're entirely filled up and there's a waiting list for Riley. But as it happens, you actually have great timing. I make no promises, but we may be able to get you in. We just got approval this morning. Approval for what? I said slowly. We're opening up the 7th floor.
In 2 miles, take exit 19 for Valley Park Drive South.
Siri chirped from my sister's phone. Charlotte, turn that off. I know where I'm going. Are you sure about that? I mean, it has been a couple of decades, Mark. Please, like I could ever forget where Adventure Valley is. Come on, we spent every summer of... Hey, there it is. I swerved briefly into the oncoming lane as Charlotte thrust her arm in front of my face to point excitedly out the window. There's Adventure Valley. Oh my god, what ride is that? That coaster, it was called, Steel something, right? No, wait. That's Mayhem Mountain, isn't it? I gently pushed my sister's arm out of my face and back over to her seat. I couldn't fault her for her excitement while I was trying so hard to control my own giddiness. It felt like we were kids again, yelling and bouncing in the backseat of my parents' car as the first shining rails and wooden planks of the park's roller coasters came into view above the treetops. That's the Steel Viper, I told her. Mayhem Mountain's on the other end of the park, and that wooden coaster over there is the Excalibur. Oh yeah, I remember those. I was always too much of a wuss to ride the Viper, but I rode the crap out of the Excalibur. Well, Charlotte, you're an adult now. I think it's time to take on the Viper. As long as the contractors have tested it and given it the okay, then I'm in. That was really the question, wasn't it? We didn't know which rides had been inspected and cleared and which ones hadn't. I sent up a silent prayer that Mayhem Mountain was counted among the rides that had. I had left Brandon several voicemails asking about it since he was the one in charge of everything, but with how fast things had been moving since we had bought the park, I couldn't fault him for being a busy man. If you had told 12-year-old me that my crazy, hyper, wild-eyed friend, Brandon Decker, would end up graduating cum laude from Northwestern Business School, I would have laughed in your face. Brandon, no way. Tyler, maybe, but never Brandon. In fact, half the reason I think he chose a business designation was because of Adventure Valley. When the park had closed in 1989, Brandon had gathered all of us together in his basement and, with a gravitas and solemnness that I had never seen in him before or since, asked us to make a pact. At the time, the promise had been the most serious vow that 5 12-year-olds could ever make. High off of an entire summer of Adventure Valley fun, we agreed with all the ceremony of a meeting of Parliament that we would one day come together and buy Adventure Valley Amusement Park. Of course, back then we had planned to just buy it and ride the roller coasters into the ground. We decided which friends from school we would let in and which enemies would be barred from the gates. It had always been our park, and it was only right that we should have it. It had taken 20 years, but we eventually did fulfill our promise, with a heck of a lot of pushing from Brandon and a sizable offer of collateral from Tyler. The bank had agreed to give us the multi-million-dollar loan to buy, repair, refurbish, and reopen the park. The size of the loan that these 6 of us were responsible for gave me nightmares for several weeks. How would this place ever turn a profit? It had been closed decades ago after operating in the red for several years. The county had experienced a high number of runaways and missing persons in the area in the last years of the 1980s. The entire region was on edge as the cases mounted and people in the area became depressed and suspicious of each other. It had absolutely killed the park's attendance. But seeing the first cresting waves of roller coaster rails through the trees made me all but forget about my financial worries. This was Adventure Valley, for Christ's sake. If we opened the gates, people would come. There, that's our exit, Charlotte squeaked. I pulled off the interstate and took a left under the bridge. Less than a mile later, we came upon the acres of the park's parking lots to our right. We turned in and drove all the way up to the front near the gates where several other cars were parked. A Lexus, a Mini Cooper, and an old Chevelle and a Honda Civic. Another rental car like ours. Looks like we're the last ones here, Charlotte said. She was right. As we pulled up next to the Lexus, I noticed a group of people standing next to the ticket booth, waving at us excitedly. Oh my god, is that Tyler? Jesus, he's lost some weight. He's so skinny now. And Brandon's losing his hair. Holy crap, is that Koji? Koji got hot. Calm down, Paris Hilton, these guys are my friends. They're off limits to you. Same rules as when we were teenagers. Besides, half of them are married. Oh really? Which half? I raised an eyebrow at Charlotte and shook my head in amused bewilderment. My little sister never had outgrown her boy craziness. Wait, who's that? Charlotte asked as we got out of the car. What? That's Scott. You know Scott. Not Scott. Scott looks exactly the same. The girl next to Scott. Oh. I had put this off so long that I had actually forgotten to tell my sister at all. That's Danny, Scott's girlfriend. Danny as in Danielle Bircher. Well, yeah. My sister gave me such a horrified look that she would think I had betrayed her to her death, but it was fleeting and quickly replaced by a sly smile. Fine by me, I'm sure she's not the same person that she was in high school. We're all adults now, right? Now come on, let's go. A sigh of relief escaped my chest and I slammed the car door and followed Charlotte over to the entrance. Though I saw most of these guys every year, seeing us all here together standing at the ticket booth of Adventure Valley, it brought me a sort of happiness that I hadn't experienced in many years. Mark Lantis, I can't believe it. Tyler had an edgy, commanding voice that probably made as many employees shudder and scatter. But I knew him like a brother, so his bravado just made me laugh. Can you believe it? I asked as I gave him a hug and a slap on the back. Back at front gates, $15 a day doesn't seem so ridiculous now. $15 a day, yeah right, Brandon said as he shook my hand. By my math, it looks like we'll be charging about $65 a day. I'll pay it. Charlotte smiled as she gave Koji a hug. Are people really going to pay $65 a day? Koji asked. Even Disneyland only charges $85 and there you get access to 2 parks. How could I forget? Brandon shook his head. One of our investors works for the Mouse. Pity they won't let you design any artwork for this place. Come on, man, I'm not an artist, I'm an engineer. Don't you mean Imagineer? Charlotte winked at him. Koji sighed and shook his head. Yeah, I do. As Brandon and Charlotte teased Koji, I made my way over to the side of the ticket booth where Scott and his girlfriend were conversing. I didn't know why Scott was being so standoffish, but I thought that it might have something to do with the investment. Scott, the least well-off of the 6 of us, worked at his dad's collision shop and hadn't had a whole lot of money to invest. I thought maybe he was embarrassed about the money, but now, watching him lean against the booth with slowly shifting eyes, I realized that it wasn't that at all. Scott was just stoned. Same old Scott. What's up, Burnout? My brother, I haven't seen you in like 15 years. How about a bro hug? Scott smiled and pushed off the wall to come give me a quick hug. Hey, how's it going, man? God, look at you. What's your diet, man? Rabbit food and lettuce? You're not gonna get any ladies with that skinny body. And your mom doesn't seem to mind. Hey Mark, I'm Danny. Do you remember me, Danny Bircher? Scott's girlfriend gave me a shy smile and stuck out her hand so that we could engage in a stiff handshake. Yeah, I think so. You were in my sister's class, right? Charlotte Lantis. And Danny had the decency to look embarrassed. Yeah, but we weren't really friends. That's putting it lightly, I thought. We were freshmen when you guys were seniors, she added. Yep, I do remember that. Maybe I should just get it over with. I called Charlotte over in the reintroduction of the two girls, while awkward was over pretty quickly to everybody's relief. We were all eager to get into the park. It was odd not stopping at the window for tickets and even odder to walk around the rusting turnstiles of the front gates. I delighted in reminding myself that we own this place now. Brandon gave us a tour of the park. Not so much of the geography, we all knew that inside and out, but of the hypothetical layout and reorganization of the park as he saw it. The Excalibur is going to need the most amount of work, according to Rich, Brandon's head contractor. A roller coaster made of wood exposed to the elements for all these years. We'll keep as much of the original structure as is safe, but we might have to rebuild most of it. Do we have money for that? Scott asked loudly from where he walked behind us with Danny. Yeah, Tyler said. We have the money for that. Ah, Mr. Moneybags, that mini dealership treating you good. I nudged him hard with my shoulder. Tyler stumbled but kept enough composure to push me back into a passing churro stall. Those 6 BMW dealerships are treating me very well. Well enough to serve as the sizable collateral that we needed, Brandon added. So, Charlotte ran up behind us and threw her arms around Tyler and Koji. Can we ride some of the rides? Are you kidding? Why do you think we're here? Tyler laughed. I'm just here for Mayhem Mountain, I said, clapping my hands and rubbing them together eagerly. Brandon threw up his hands. All right, fine. I thought you guys would be interested in how your investment is coming along. Koji snorted. All we're interested in is the projected ROI and, more importantly, which rides have passed a safety inspection. Oh. Brandon stopped walking and tried to look annoyed, and failing at that he smiled. A little over half of them are rideable. Suddenly everybody was talking at once. Is Steel Viper open? Yep, that's the one. What about Snapdragon? Yeah, that one is good to go too. Renegade Falls? Nah, the water's not on. High Roller? Yep. Space Spin? Oh yeah. Power Tower? They're doing the inspection this week. But there was only one ride that I really cared about. Mine and Brandon's favorite. What about Mayhem Mountain? Hell yes, he answered to collective groans from the rest. Mayhem Mountain had always been our thing. The others had always been happy to ride High Roller and Snapdragon into exhaustion. Brandon and I always split off toward the end of the day to ride Mayhem Mountain into the twilight hours. Charlotte shuddered. I hate that ride. Yeah, it's just boring, Koji agreed. I helped design something similar for Disneyland Hong Kong. We put it in Fantasyland for Pete's sake. Hey, that ride is awesome. It's long and it goes upside down, I argued. Charlotte is even too scared to ride it. I'm not scared of that ride, it just gives me the creeps. Something about it just, I don't know, it seems off. Alright, look, we'll start at this end of the park and work our way towards the back. That way we can ride every ride that's passed inspection, including Mayhem Mountain, Brandon said. And Snapdragon, Tyler added, and the others nodded excitedly. Yes, every ride, and of course we can ride them, as many times as we want. Hell yes, brother. Koji high-fived Brandon and we headed down the street towards Space Spin. Our progress through the park was blissfully slow. Everyone wanted to ride every ride multiple times and one person always had to stay in the loading area to operate the ride. It only took an hour or two to forget that I was a fully grown 35-year-old man. Being back here running through the lineways with my friends, arguing who got the first row of the first car, it was like being 12 years all over again. But still my eye was constantly drawn up over the buildings into the distance, to the back of the park where the high gleaming rails of Mayhem Mountain shined in an obscured sun. There would be no arguing who got front row on that coaster. It was me and Brandon. It was always me and Brandon. Charlotte, Tyler, and Koji were the most like children, constantly running ahead and arguing over which ride to get on next, yelling back to ask Brandon if this one or that one had been cleared by the contractors. Brandon and I held back from the group a bit, discussing ideas and possible improvements for the park. Scott and Danny took up the rear of the group, quietly talking and lighting joints. When we arrived at the Enterprise, a simple ride that consisted of spinning cars on a circular track, I offered to flip the switch while the rest of the group rode to excess. The Enterprise always made me sick when we were kids. Brandon offered to stay on the platform with me to chat while everyone else rode the ride. I flipped the switch to turn the ride on, and as the cars spun away from the loading area, the Enterprise's signage came into view. I sighed. All day I had been trying to ignore the bright graffiti sprayed all over the park, but the words painted over the signage for the Enterprise were impossible to ignore. Where did the missing kids go? And the rest of the graffiti in the park was much the same. Most said things like, "Where are they? Runaway Row. Find Ryan Kinski. And the missing are now dead." The similar sayings could be found in town sprayed across a few dilapidated buildings in the industrial district. Brandon's eyes avoided the sign, but I could tell that he was thinking about it too. "Do you think the reason they shut this park down, do you see that being an issue for park attendants?" I asked as casually as I could. Brandon was quiet for a few moments as he waited for the ride to slow to a stop so that he could flip the switch again. "Nah, I don't think so. The low attendance issues aren't actually what shut the park down." "They aren't?" This surprised me. "Nope. When we were negotiating the sale of the park, I was given access to the park's financials in the 80s. So they weren't operating at a loss. Oh, they were. But this park has operated in the red since opening day in the 70s. Half of their revenue was being fed back into something called county services, whatever that is. The bank couldn't tell me, and believe me, I tried to find out." "County services," I mused. "Yep, it's bizarre. And according to the paperwork, the park was closed because the owner didn't want to live here anymore. And he couldn't be bothered to wait for a decent offer on the property, so he just sold it off to the bank for next to nothing. So he was a rich guy." I leaned back against the railing to stretch my back. "And an idiot." "Yes, to an extreme in both cases. The owner of the park was Abel Bisset." "Abel Bisset, related to that French billionaire, I'm guessing." Brandon nodded. "Michael Bisset. He built this park for his son in the 70s. Abel was never really what we would call business inclined. I've always heard him described as simple." "I can't believe the son of a billionaire lives in this area." "Well, not anymore. He moved on decades ago." I shook my head in disbelief. Who would ever have thought that our simple little park was owned by a famous billionaire's son? Heck, I may even have sat next to him on rides and had no idea. "You guys want to go again?" Brandon yelled to the others as the ride again came to a stop. "I'm ready to move on," Koji yelled back. "Anybody want to ride again?" "Nope," a chorus of voices replied. It was near 5 o'clock when we finally arrived at Mayhem Mountain. As the sun began to set, a familiar panic and urgency welled in the pit of my stomach. It took a moment for me to realize that we didn't have to leave when the park closed this time, because the park didn't close. We could stay until sunup if we wanted to. As I eagerly approached the turnstile for Mayhem Mountain, Tyler spoke up behind me. "Listen, can we run into town and grab something to eat before we ride Mayhem?" "You really want to ride Mayhem after we eat?" asked Koji. Good point." "There's only one loop." Danny rolled her eyes. "Two," I said. "Don't forget the inline roll." "Yep, 2, Scott answered. "And plus it's a 2-minute ride. If your food isn't sitting well, you've got a long wait until it's over." "Look," I said, "let's ride it a couple of times and then go eat. When we come back, we'll see how we feel." Everyone nodded and we started walking through the lineways up to the platform. When we reached the loading dock, I was excited to see our favorite green car sitting on the track. Front seat. Brandon and I yelled simultaneously as the train cars came into view and everyone behind us groaned. I'm staying here, Charlotte said. I'll just work the launchpad thingy. Still scared after all these years, Char? Scott teased her. Oh, shut up, burnout. Scott laughed and tousled her hair before running and jumping into the first car behind Brandon and I. Danny got in next to him and then Tyler and Koji took the second car. We pulled the shoulder restraints down and they locked in place. Ready? Charlotte asked. Yep, Brandon yelled back. Send the car through. Charlotte pulled the lever and the brakes disengaged. As the car moved forward, I turned to Brandon. Did we get the green car on purpose? I yelled at him as the coaster clacked around the load platform and began the clattery climb up the first lift hill. Yep. We sent cars through here all morning, but I made sure Rich knew to leave the green machine in the loading bay. Awesome. As the train climbed up the lift hill, I made no attempt to hide my utter glee. I looked out over the expansive park and couldn't believe that it was mine. Every track, every car, every turnstile, every screw. From the front gate to the overflow parking lot in the back, it was all ours. How I wished I could go back in time and tell a young me waiting in the 2-hour line for Mayhem Mountain that one day you will own this place. And as we crested the hill and the train fell into the first drop, I realized that I essentially had gone back in time. At least I was screaming like a 12-year-old, as was everybody else behind me. We dipped into the first tester hill and then banked hard and up to the second lift hill. We dropped from there down into the vertical loop, banked around a set of gift shops, up briefly and then down a small hill into the inline roll. When we arrived back at the loading bay, we were all screaming and whooping. Charlotte didn't even have to ask, just smiled at us and sent us through again. We went twice more before we finally got off the ride. Koji walked over to check out the control panel while the rest of us taunted my sister. You sure you don't want to go, Char? It's awesome. Nah, I'm good. I have no problem being the carny for this ride, she laughed. Oh, come on, Charlotte, just one time. One time and we'll leave you alone, Tyler urged. No way, not interested. I'll ride anything else though. Hey, do you guys know what Track B is? Koji asked. Track B, what do you mean? Brandon walked over to Koji at the control board and raised an eyebrow. That's weird. It's probably just the track they used to get the cars into the storage bay, Scott said with a shrug. No, Koji said. That's called a transfer track. Track B has to be something else. Yeah, well, I've been on this ride enough times to know that there is no other track. Yep, Tyler agreed with me. He has. So, should we try it? Brandon tested. No way, you idiot, said Charlotte. If you don't know what Track B is, that means the contractors don't know about it either, which means that it hasn't been inspected in at least 20 years. That's suicide. Look, Koji said. If Track B exists, then even the most incompetent of engineers would have found it during an inspection. Yeah, and Rich cleared this entire ride, Brandon nodded. Probably just the ride in reverse, we're good. Well, we're in, announced Scott from the other side of the track, though Danny didn't look quite on board with the idea. Mark? Tyler asked. Yeah, I guess I'm in. What's the worst that could happen? We get funneled into a repair bay. Alright, then I'm in too, Tyler said hesitantly. Koji shrugged. Here goes nothing. He flipped the switch over to Track B and a moment later a loud metallic scraping some distance away filled the park. The sound lasted almost a minute. I studied the familiar silver roller coaster under the pink sky of the setting sun, but I saw no physical changes to the track. I looked over at Brandon and a shrug of his shoulders told me that he didn't either. Shall we? Scott asked, gesturing to the train cars that we had just disembarked. I gave Charlotte a questioning look, but she shook her head emphatically no. So it was just these 6 of us again. It's only right that you two take the bow of the ship. Tyler gave a mock salute. Oh, captains, my captains. I laughed and hopped into the right side of the front row. Brandon crawled into the seat next to me. Tyler and Koji got in behind us and Scott and Danny took the back. We pulled the shoulder bars down and they locked into place. Are you sure about this? Charlotte asked when everybody was settled, and Danny said something from her place a few rows back, but all that I heard was Brandon yelling, "Pull it!" The brakes released and the train rolled away from the platform into the twilight of dusk. The lights had lit up on the track while we had been arguing and the roller coaster looked absolutely beautiful. I was filled with awe and reverence of what this place truly meant to me and my friends. It was a symbol of our youth and innocence and blissful ignorance of the world. It was our own little bubble of happiness. The coaster again climbed the lift hill, and from the top, Brandon and I studied the track, but in those few seconds I saw no difference. Brandon looked over and I shook my head at him disappointedly. And by the time that we had reached the vertical loop halfway through the ride, it was clear that there was no track B. But it was hard to be upset because I was still on Mayhem Mountain and still found it an impossible challenge not to smile. We banked around the now brightly lit gift shops, up the small tester hill, and then back down to the inline roll. Except the inline roll was suddenly above us. We had missed it. Instead, the track now descended into a large, square hole in the ground behind the gift shops, and we were headed directly into it. I was in too much shock to scream or even move. The black hole swallowed us in an instant and we descended into complete darkness. I felt a comfortable pressure leave my shoulders and realized that the shoulder bars had been released. I gripped the front lip of the ledge of my seat and heard the terrified screams of my friends behind me as the coaster suddenly spun into what felt like an inline roll. I was too scared to do anything but hold on for dear life, though some part of my brain registered that the G-forces of the roll probably would have been enough to keep me in my seat if I had let go. Probably. We came out of the inline roll and dropped again, hard. As the roller coaster dropped, the room suddenly lit up around us and I saw the track below arcing up into a light tester hill. As we hit the bottom of the hill, the shoulder bars lowered mechanically. The car went over the small tester hill and then braked to start up another tall lift hill. I took my first breath since dropping through the ground and looked around, tuning out the screams of Danny and Tyler behind me. We were in what can be described as a cavernous room, and I only assume it stretched to the farthest reaches of the park above. There were lots of vertical loops, high drops, and sharp curves that put the track perpendicular to the ground. Throughout the entire sub-level building, lamps dotted the wall every 30 feet. They put out a dreary yellowed glow for as far as the eye could see, but many were burnt out and in parts the track disappeared into darkness. But in the dull, yellow edges of the light, I saw something that registered in me a horror beyond death. Far away from us in a section of shadowy track, I saw the high crest of a peak hill which reached almost the ceiling of the giant room. And then the track just ended. Suddenly feeling the horrible reality of the world outside my mind began to bleed in. Danny was screaming uncontrollably, Tyler was crying, bawling even. Koji was yelling at Brandon, who was looking straight at me, hitting my leg hard and repeating my name. As the cars continued to climb, I finally gave him my attention. I didn't want to be alone in the fear anymore. "What is this?" was all that I could think of to say. "Hey, we have to get off this ride. We have to get off this ride, Mark." "Yeah, I know, man. We're going to die." "I know, man," I yelled as we reached the top of the lift hill and dropped over the other side. I squeezed my eyes shut until I felt the shoulder bars once again release, and I bit my lip to keep from crying. I opened my eyes and choked as I watched the track ahead of us bend up into a vertical loop. I reached up and tried to pull the shoulder bar back down, but it was locked into place. Hang on to the seats," I yelled as loud as I could. As we approached the loop, I felt the brakes engaging, slowing the car and a tow cable catch beneath my feet. We were being pulled up through the loop, but too slowly for gravity to keep us in our seats. As the train began to invert, I felt my feet rise from the floor of the car. My hair fell over my face and my butt left the seat. I closed my eyes and tried to block out the screams of terror from behind me. I concentrated on my death grip of the ledge of my seat as we rounded the track. We remained upside down for what felt like eternity. Finally, the pressure began to ease. My butt dropped to my seat and my feet to the floor. The white noise subsided from my ears and I heard Koji screaming, "Tyler, no, he fell out. God, he fell out. He's dead, man, he's dead." He hit the track down there. Brandon yelled at me, wide-eyed and crazy looking. I was finally seeing the Brandon from my youth. The shoulder bars descended again, this time locking in tighter. We came out of the loop and sped up and down several tester hills. I tried to study the track ahead of us as we went through the safer parts. I thought that I saw water reflecting off the metal rails somewhere in the distance. Brandon sobbed in his seat. "Mark, what are we gonna do? I don't want to die, man. I don't want to go." I don't know what to do. I'm sorry. I'm so scared too," I answered him. We banked around a corner of the room and the shoulder bars released again. This time we dove into a curve that put the left side of the train parallel to the ground, and it was a long drop. I gripped the edge of the seat tightly as before, but this time I kept my eyes open and was able to catch Brandon as he began to slip out of his seat. And by the time the train had righted itself, I couldn't tell who had been lost. Most of the screaming behind me had turned to loud sobbing or silence. The shoulder bar didn't re-engage and I felt the car's brakes slow the train down again. I didn't have to look to know what was coming next. It was another inverted loop. This one was tall and large and I could tell that we would be upside down for longer. Someone behind me began screaming again, Danny I think, as I tried to take measured breaths and position my hurting hands back under the lip of the seat. Brandon did the same and looked over at me as the car started up the loop with tears streaming down his face. "I don't want to die here, man." I shook my head back at him because I could think of nothing to say. I felt tears leave my own eyes as we reached the tipping point of the loop, and my feet again left the floor. Before we were even completely upside down, I felt my back begin to slip down the seat. I thought that if I lost my grip, I could try to grab for the shoulder bars when I fell out of the car. The car suddenly stopped and I opened my eyes to see that we were completely inverted. I grunted loudly at the pain and immense effort that it was taking to keep my grip on the seat. The car started to move again slowly, and I heard Brandon say something to me. I looked over at him just before he slid out of the car. 1 second he was there next to me, and the next he was falling away from the car. I saw Brandon try to grab the shoulder bar on the way out, but he couldn't keep his grip on it. I watched him fall and saw him break his back on the track below and he stopped moving. I stared down at him as the car continued to move slowly around the loop and he stared back up at me, dead or dying. By the time the car hit him on the way out of the loop, he was completely gone. The shoulder bars re-engaged and we went through a dreadfully long period where nothing happened. We were secured in our seats by the restraints as the coaster spent what felt like several minutes racing over hills, banks, curves, and even an inline roll. Without the adrenaline pumping through my veins, I felt the shock begin to wear off. It was replaced by a panic and fear unlike I had ever experienced, and I decided that was the point of this section of track, to build and facilitate an unbearable fear. I felt the brakes engage finally and I looked ahead to find the loop that we were surely entering, but there was none. We were high, almost to the top of the ceiling, and we slowed to a stop on a straightaway. Directly ahead was a drop at the bottom of the hill, a series of 4 different tracks, with a transfer stack just before they split off. Each track had 5 or so feet of color, red, orange, green, and blue, before racing off in different directions. I felt an urgent shaking of my shoulder and turned around to hear what Koji was saying. "Which track are we connected to?" I looked at the transfer stack. "Green. Where does green go?" It was hard to hear him over the sound of Danny's sobbing from the second car. I tried to trace the green track through the building. constantly losing it and finding it again. I wasn't sure, but it seemed to end at the lift hill that I had seen earlier. The hill with no track at the top. "It ends at that hill." I yelled back at him and pointed. Danny cried out louder. While we were stopped, I rubbed my hurting hands together. As I looked down at them, I noticed something new in the car. At some point, a small blinking panel had flipped over in the wall at the front of the car. It had 4 colored buttons and an old analog timer. The timer was so old and damaged that, though the numbers were clearly changing, I couldn't see how long we had. "We get to choose," I said, and explained what I was looking at. "Can you see which track ends where?" Koji asked. I followed all the tracks as best I could, but the rails circled and slid in between each other. It was hard to tell which track went where. "I think the blue track ends in that big pool in the corner. The red track ends in a wall and the orange one just drops into a hole in the floor like the one we came down here through, I think." "There's no way out, dude," said Scott from the second car. His voice was unsettlingly calm. "They're just telling us how we're going to die." "We can still find a way out of this," I answered quietly, more to myself than to him. "Choose the pool," Scott said, and I could hear the tears in his voice. "I've heard drowning isn't an awful death. I've heard it's calming at the end." "No way, choose the hole in the floor," said Koji. "It's possible that it drops down into another cavern like this. There might be more track, which means more time to figure out how to live." "You don't think we'd be the first to choose that option, do you?" Scott asked him. "And no one that went missing ever came back. There's just more death in that hole." "I don't want to die like this," Koji begged. "And at least it's a chance." Danny was still whimpering in the back and offered no suggestion. It seemed the decision was up to me and I had to make it fast. I knew I didn't want to die by dropping off the track. I didn't want to drown. Perhaps the quickest death was the wall. More than likely, we would all be killed instantly. Less suffering, less time to think about our fates. But the truth was, I wasn't entirely positive which track ended where. It was all educated guesswork and my time was up. "The orange, let's go down to the second floor if there is one." Scott and Danny said nothing and Koji choked out the last words that I would ever hear him say. "Push it before it chooses for us." Before I could think about it any longer, I pushed the orange button and committed us to whatever death it led to. We heard the metallic scraping of the track transferring below. Once the orange track was securely connected, the brakes in the car released and the train rode slowly toward the drop. Danny started screaming again. As we dropped on the hill, I got a better view of the orange track. There was a vertical loop ahead that didn't look as high as the others that we had been through. In fact, it looked like there was a chance that the fall wouldn't kill us. If it wasn't an optical illusion, and if the shoulder bar is disengaged for that loop, we might have a shot at living through this. I yelled back to everybody behind me. "Let yourself fall out of the loop, the one up there." Nobody responded to me, which didn't matter because I didn't think that I would have the courage to let go of the seat anyway. We raced along the track, in and out of banks and curves. At one point we passed along the pool and I looked down. Below the water's surface, the track ended above an even deeper pool. I could see the shadows of several coaster cars at the very bottom. I suddenly felt the brakes engage and I realized that we were coming to the loop. I tested the shoulder bar by pushing up on it, but it stayed locked. I was somewhat relieved in that moment to know that I wouldn't have to make the decision to fall out now or gamble on the orange track. But suddenly, the restraints released. As we started up the loop, I gripped the lip of the seat tightly and turned my head back to look down. It looked like we were very high and I only hoped the ground was the loosely packed dirt that it looked to be. I had to choose now, the fall or the hole. I chose the fall. As I began to slide up the seat, I yelled at the others to let go and fall out of the car. And then I closed my eyes and let go. I felt my head crack the shoulder bar on the way out. It wasn't like a slow motion fall. It was over before I realized that I'd actually let go. One moment I felt an intense pain as my head hit the bar, and in the same moment I realized that I was on the ground. I hadn't even had the time to realize the possibility of hitting the track below or getting run over by the cars. I opened my eyes in time to watch the cars speed over the track above me. The pain didn't hit me all at once. I had one long, blissful second before I felt it, and then I was in agony. I had hoped my body was so in shock that I wouldn't feel much of the pain, but I felt it all. I concentrated on keeping my eyes open and trying to catalog the damage. There was blood on my clothes, but I didn't know what part of my body it was coming from. I heard screaming as well, but I didn't know if it was in my head or coming from my friends as they approached the end. I didn't want to move, didn't think that it was safe to move, but I knew that I had to, if only to pull out my phone. With trembling fingers, I pulled the thing from my pocket and brought it to my face, trying to focus on the screen. But it was shattered and it refused to even turn on. I threw it away from me and then I realized the silence. Their ride had ended. With a great amount of effort, I rolled over onto my stomach and dragged my broken body across the ground toward where I thought I remembered seeing the hole. I crawled for what seemed like hours, and maybe it was. Sometimes I tried to stand or even kneel, but the pain in my back and ribs was too great. I passed out several times from shock and pain, but eventually I made it to where the track had disappeared into the ground. I pulled myself to the edge and looked down inside the hole. The track ended at just below the surface. It was a natural shaft with walls made of rock. I don't know how deep it went and I didn't want to. It was a fate that I had only narrowly escaped. But then I thought my friends were down there and maybe somebody had survived. Koji! My voice echoed loudly down the shaft. No answer. Scott! Nothing. I reached for a nearby screw and I dropped it down the hole. It took half a minute to land, and when it did, it was with a tink as it hit something metal. The small sound echoed up the shaft and out into the cavernous room, and I realized this place was built with acoustics in mind. I rolled over onto my back and studied everything that I could see from where I was, staving off my body's desire to pass out again. I felt nothing but numbness when I finally saw what I was looking for: a long panoramic window in the far wall. I knew what track B was for, and I finally let myself slip away into the darkness. I remember very little of my rescue. There were lots of people in uniform and my sister yelling, and pain, lots of pain. I was in and out on the way to the hospital, but I remember that I passed through the room behind the window at some point, and from my stretcher through the chaos, I saw in that room a single chair facing the window. It was covered in a deep layer of dust. I was never visited by anyone official, let alone asked to give a statement. Charlotte stayed by my side at the hospital for months while I recovered. She wouldn't say much about that day, although she finally did tell me something. She said that they wouldn't let her ride with me to the hospital and that somebody had offered her a ride. On that drive, she had been spoken to by two people that had convinced her to never speak of what had happened and to convince me of the same. Whatever they threatened her with had her begging me to agree, and I did at the time. I am still to this day learning to walk without aid. I never saw Mayhem Mountain again. The loan defaulted and Adventure Valley was bought up by an unknown LLC, which bulldozed it and built a block of apartments over the top. They're still empty to this day. I don't like the dark anymore. It reminds me of the horror my friends experienced as they looked down and saw the track end before they disappeared into that hole. I try not to think about what they must have felt as they fell down the shaft in complete darkness, strapped to a roller coaster waiting for the terrible end. I wish that I had chosen the pool, if only to save them from that fate. As for the billionaire's son, he was only simple in the fact that he was a man of simple tastes, and he still is. I looked him up once only a few years ago. He owns several amusement parks now, all sizable but small enough to be popular only in their specific regions. In fact, one is not very far from where I live now. I've thought about going many times just to check, just to see. But then I realized that I probably didn't need to search all the rides in the park to know. Because I know that somewhere in that park, some ride in some corner has a track B. If you're hearing this, then it means that I escaped. My story is a brutal one, and I'll share it in the style that it was intended to be read, so that you might understand, so that you might see it through the eyes of one who suffered. And please consider this a cautionary tale. It is, I admit, unlikely that you will find yourself in such a situation. But hey, you never know, right? My name is Cater, and I take pride in my work, and I work on the pipes. My current job revolves around an oil pipeline in the Persian Gulf. It's at the very bottom of the sea between Saudi Arabia and Iran. It's just gone midday, but unfortunately, we are too far down for the light at the surface to reach us. So my current surroundings are illuminated by nothing more than the yellowish beam of my flashlight. A small collection of bubbles escape from my diving mask. They ripple up and out of sight as I gently kick my flippers, slowly propelling myself through the gloom. As a worker down here, I am one of 3, but the others are not currently visible to me. My beam lands on the great metal pipe, the one that extends up and into the habitat, a cage-like artificial pocket of air, and down into the depths below. I look down and cast my beam over the pipe's body. The light catches on nothing but the rusted metal, a lone, cylindrical obelisk in the watery world around me. I lower the beam and I cast it as far down as it'll go, but all I see are my flippers beneath me gently kicking, and the gray pipe vanishing into the blue-black darkness beneath my feet. A chill passes through my body. I hear the sound of my heartbeat in my ears. Where this vertical pipe connects to its horizontal brother on the ocean floor, there is an enormous metal structure of sorts, one with the purpose of keeping a series of temporary installments attached to the pipe in place. I cannot see this monstrosity at present, but the simple act of knowing that far below lurks a monstrous metal skeleton, waiting patiently beneath my feet. I shiver. They tell tales about this place, about the sea. Tales of malevolent spirits that play tricks on divers. Water Jinn, they're called. These spirits show the divers illusions and distortions to confuse them. They get them deliberately lost as a form of amusement, the tales say. And then depending on the spirit's moods, they either get bored and let them go, or they devour them. Something glitters in the gloom in the corner of my eye, and I wheel around in the water, raising the beam of the flashlight, a gasp escaping into my mask. But the beam lands on nothing more than a school of tiny silverfish. They flitter by and pay me no mind, and I catch my breath. Idiot Cater, I murmur to myself, my voice obscured by the mask. And I kicked my way up through the water, following the pipe towards the habitat's air pocket. I see the waterline rippling above me. It draws closer and closer, and I catch sight of flashes of color beyond, my comrades. Eventually, I break through the surface, popping off my mouthpiece and raising my mask, shaking my hair as I clamber up onto the little platform that surrounds us. A bench-like apparatus that goes all the way around the inside rim of the habitat. As I said before, I am one of 3. My colleagues are called Amir and Ahmad, and they sit waiting for me, their legs dangling over the side, their flippers dipped in the water beneath. I let out a grunt and a sigh as I take a seat beside them, my own flippers half submerged in the water beneath. It seems almost paradoxical, this little space, a marvel of physics. We sit far below the surface of the sea in the small confines that the habitat provides, and yet we have air to breathe. The habitat is a metal box about 4 meters in width and 3 in height. The air in here is dank and stale, but it is at the least quite breathable. From the center of the water between us, the pipe extends up and into the stagnant air. The pipe is currently corked by an enormous rubber plug, one that we will need to deflate before our shift is over. Its purpose is to prevent the oil inside the pipe from leaking out into the sea. Thanks to the habitat, we can safely remove it now, without risk of environmental damage. The pipe in question goes all the way down to the bottom of the sea in a straight line, and there it splits in two and travels horizontally across the seafloor. One end travels north a few miles out from the Saudi Arabian coast, and the other travels south. It's just about wide enough for a man to squeeze down, should an emergency repair need taking place from the inside, but the diameter is not large. I wipe some of the salt water from my face as Amir connects a long black cable to the depressurizer. The end of the cable leads down into the pipe and is connected to the rubber plug. "You see any spirits down there today, Kedar?" Amir asks me as he fastens the seal on the cable. "The Jan al-Bahar," Ahmad chuckles, scratching his beard. His voice, as does Amir's, echoes around the somewhat claustrophobic confines of the habitat. I smile dryly. "No spirits, Amir, just..." I think about the pipe, disappearing down into the darkness far below. I can't quite explain why it gives me the creeps, it just does. "Just what?" Amir asked me. Nothing," I finish. "What about you guys, any spirits?" I turn to Ahmad. "Have you finally caught sight of the Jan al-Bahar?" I wave my hands and fingers, mysteriously teasing him, but Ahmad is undaunted. "You mock, Kedar, but this sea, this ancient sea, if we're going to see one, then it'll be here." He claps his hands together and a small shower of water droplets splash down into the water by our feet. The shimmering blue gateway to the sea below, the sea above, and the ocean all around. "And I tell you what else," he continues, raising a finger. "I did see something." "Oh, here we go," Amir mutters, rolling his eyes. No, listen," Ahmad says hurriedly. "I just listened to this. So there I was right about an hour ago, swimming around near the pipe when I may have gotten a little distracted by a fish." Amir shakes his head and we exchange a glance. "You should have seen it, Amir. A great golden thing." I wanted a better look, so I left the pipe and followed it, just for a short while, and eventually it got spooked and vanished into the blue. Ahmad falters and he rubs his chin. It was actually quite an alarming experience. I turned back to the pipe and of course I saw nothing but the endless void of the ocean. I tried to retrace my steps, but again, there were no steps. I was alone and it was frightening. Amir and myself remained silent. But then, that's when I saw it. I saw them. Ahmad continues, practically jumping on the metal ledge that we're all perched on. "Hey, easy," I say, as I feel myself rattle in time to his jumps. Amir flicks a switch on the depressurization machine. It starts to rumble. Ahmad leans forward, looking between us. Out there in the far distance, I see a trio of shapes. 3 figures like shadows in the gloom. "Oh, you should take up poetry," Amir mutters and he flicks another switch. Against my sense of better judgment, I am too engrossed in Ahmad's story to pay attention to exactly what it is that he's doing. "What kind of shapes?" I ask. "What kind of figures?" "They were like smoke, except no, more like mist maybe. Thick, dense mist, with eyes that flickered pale like refracted sunlight. You had to look a certain way to see them." Ahmad's voice drops low and becomes wistful. "I saw them only for a second or two and then they were gone. Vanished." "How'd you get back to the pipe?" I ask. "Did the spirits show you the way?" Amir chuckles. "Oh, well, no, I just used the compass," Ahmad says. "But that's beside the point. I saw something, I know that I did. I thought the spirits were supposed to be dangerous, Amir says. The stories always tell of how cruel they are. They play pranks on divers like us, you know. They bang on the pipes. They groan and moan from the inside. Makes you think that there are monsters inside, waiting to burst right out and get you. Well, maybe that's why they appeared to me, Ahmad says thoughtfully, and then gestures to the pipe between us. Maybe they were trying to warn us. Perhaps there's a monster in the pipe. Amir snorts. Don't be ridiculous. Maybe once the plug is deflated, Ahmad says softly, maybe the beast will spring right out. And where would we go? We are effectively trapped down here when you really think about it. There is a moment of uncomfortable silence, broken only by a slow hissing produced by the depressurization machine as it begins its work deflating the plug in the pipe. Psh, Amir says after a beat, shaking his head. Don't say such stupid stuff. What nonsense. All I'm saying, Ahmad finishes shrugging, is that the spirits aren't necessarily something to be feared. I know you guys don't really believe, but they can be helpful too. They don't devour people. The Jan al-Bahar, mischievous maybe, but not unkind in their own way. Amir grunts and waves his hand dismissively. Ahmad looks at me for support and I just laugh. Come on, I say. Enough is enough, I think. We have work to do. Wouldn't want Zahir to snitch on us again. The conversation shifts and a collective groan echoes around the habitat. I can't stand that guy, Amir says dramatically, and we all laugh. Our collective dislike of the man has become a running joke between us. Zahir is technically a colleague of ours, and although we rarely work in close capacity, his projects always seem to be in tandem to our own, so we're never quite rid of him. He has thick red hair and a ridiculous scraggly beard, and all in all he makes himself an easy target. A busybody and a teacher's pet, you see. He clocks in more hours than he has to, unpaid I might add, yet despite his enduring and tragic efforts, he always gets passed up for promotion because he has a vacuum for a personality. Zahir is entirely devoid of charisma. Maybe we should play a prank on him before we go up, Amir suggests, as the machine deflating the plug kicks up a gear. The hissing grows louder. What kind of prank? Ahmad asks. I don't know. We could head over to his site at Azrak 1, bang some pipes and make some noise. Give him a little spook before his shift is over. It could be fun. Nah, it wouldn't be worth it, I reply. As much fun as that sounds, Azrak 1 is 1.5 kilometers away. Do you really want to swim all that way for some childish prank? And besides, we would never fool Zahir with spirit BS. The man doesn't believe in anything. He has no imagination. True, Amir nods regretfully. He fiddles with the machine beside him and he gives it a light slap. And it does its job. It finishes deflating the plug to a sufficient degree, freeing up a space around it and opening a way down into the pipe. What this was supposed to do was to allow us to reach in, haul the deflated plug out and check for leaks, damage, and whether the plug needs a potential replacement. We should have been able to do this easily and safely, as the pipe at this time and on this day is supposed to be filled with oil. But for whatever reason, the pipe is not. There is, as it turns out, significantly less oil inside than we were told, and was believed. And so what happens instead takes place over the course of a few terrible seconds. A true nightmare that I would never ever be able to forget. The positive pressure inside the habitat, the little atmosphere keeping us alive, rushes instantaneously into the pipe and forces down the small amount of oil at a monstrous and inhuman speed. This motion creates what I can only describe as a blinding vortex. The air and the ocean are hauled up and around like a sudden whirlwind of chaos and terror in the blink of an eye. My vision is lost to a brutal and immediate rush of darkness as my body is slammed into the habitat wall, I scream, but all that I produce is froth and bubbles as my shoulder cracks on the edge of something metal. I don't know which way is up or down. The safety and the sanctuary of the habitat is shattered. I can see nothing but shadow as water blasts into my nose and my mouth and eyes, and I'm sucked instantly and brutally down into the pipe. I can feel its walls pressing against me on all sides, and I'm dragged cataclysmically between them. I am forced through the water and the oil headfirst at near breakneck speed. Blood rushes to my head as my arms and legs are smashed and battered against the metal. There is only terror, and darkness. My head strikes against the metal as the pipe levels out, and the world behind my screwed shut eyelids flashes red and then white. A ringing echoes in my ears and competes with the thunderous rush of the water as I release an involuntary bellow of pain. Oil and seawater pour into my mouth, my lungs, and I swallow some and breathe in the rest, choking and drowning as I'm dragged through the pipe along the seafloor. I'm going to die. This one singular thought plays over and over in my head. I'm going to die, and this is the end. The terror of my situation for a quick fleeting moment is replaced by an eerie calm. The sounds of the rushing, hammering water do not lessen, but I find my attitude changed. It soothes me, and I think about a beach that I visited as a young child with my family as I prepare to take my final breath. Except, instead of producing bubbles as I do so, I instead begin to choke and to splutter. I start to cough. Spluttering, coughing, and I realize at once that this can only mean one thing. I have found air. I gasp and retch. I try to bring my hands up to my mouth, but they bang painfully against the inner wall of the pipe. My right wrist throbs angrily, sending shards of pain shooting up my arm. I think the entire hand may be broken. Air, I think to myself, and the vision of the beach is lost. The terror floods immediately back into my mind in the same manner as the water was hauled into the pipe. Most of my head is submerged in the water, though my eyes and nose and mouth are free. If I lift my head, then my ears are raised above the waterline and I'm able to hear, but the action presses my forehead against the cold metal above me. I've stopped moving, and the reality of my situation suddenly sets in. I'm in the pipe. Oh no, I murmur aloud, retching as I cough up water and oil. Oh no, I scream. I slam my good fist against the metal, shouting for help. Please, I scream into the pitch black darkness. Please, someone, Amir, Ahmad. Panic strikes. There's nowhere to go, nowhere to turn, and no one to hear me. I can barely move. The water ebbs and sloshes around my face and I gasp. My breathing becomes shallow and dangerous. You're not drowning, I have to keep telling myself. You're not drowning. You have some air, you can breathe. You can breathe, calm yourself. Calm yourself, Kadar. I try to raise my legs and one of my flippers kicks against the roof of the pipe. I try to turn a little to my side and realize that to do so requires significant effort and a reasonable degree of pain. I have done some serious damage to my shoulder and my neck too, perhaps. The simple act of raising my head causes immense pain to shoot down my spine, but to allow my head to lower completely would mean the majority of my face is submerged. I force myself to slow my breathing. That's the priority. Nice, steady breathing. In and out, slow, deep breaths. With grunts of pain and a hammering heart, I shuffle and twist as best I can, searching my person for my scuba equipment. I believe that I'm only wearing a single flipper now. The other must have been torn off as I was sucked into the pipe. No other equipment can be found. My breathing mask and the air tank, it's all gone. It's gone. Oh God, I whisper, and despite my sense of logic, I bang against the pipe. Hello, I shout into the inky darkness. Hello, is anyone there? Kadar? Comes a voice from a little ways back along the pipe. It echoes from the darkness beyond my feet. I try to raise my face a little higher to look down into the void, but it's futile. I can see nothing. "Hello?" I shout back. "Who is it? Ahmad, are you alright?" "Kedar," he shouts, a relief tempered with terror. "You're alive. I can breathe. Are you okay?" Another voice echoes from beyond, even Ahmad. It is fainter, but I can still hear. "Guys," comes the voice of Amir. "Guys, are you both alright?" "Oh, thank the Lord," I mutter, holding back a sob of relief. "Amir, Ahmad, it's Kedar. Are you hurt?" "Yes," Amir calls after me. "I believe one of my arms is broken." "Likewise," Amir shouts, and then a little quieter. "I think my legs are too. Oh God." He releases what sounds like a cry of pain and then swears. "What do we do?" Ahmad calls into the pipe. "What do we do?" He kicks against the pipe, and the sound reverberates down and over my head. "Okay, hold on, just hold on," I shout, clenching my hands into fists, thinking, using my overheating brain as best as I can. The three of us are all alive. We're trapped in the pipe at the bottom of the sea. No one knows that we're down here, and once they find the wreckage of the habitat, they'll probably assume that we were killed instantly, cast out into the sea perhaps. I feel the panic returning. I try to stretch out my limbs, but I'm unable. I kick the pipe in frustration and let out a shout of rage. "Kedar, calm down," calls Ahmad. "It's alright, we'll be alright." Yeah, I need to calm down. First things first, the pipe, when it reaches the sea floor, it splits into two. I don't know if we've been pulled north towards the side of Azrak 1 or south towards the side of Azrak 2. How far away are they? I try to think. Azrak 1 is situated around 1.5 kilometers north of our former location at the habitat. Azrak 2 is over twice that distance south. I have no idea how far along we were pulled down the pipe. It all happened so fast. We could be hundreds of meters in either direction by now. All I know is that the air we're breathing and the pocket created is likely due to the undulations in the pipe. Small bumps and raises over support beams. It's entirely possible that there are more of these further down the tunnel, but how large is each air pocket, and at what point do they run out? "Okay," I shout down. "Friends, I have an idea and we don't have time to waste." "All ears, brother," Ahmad calls up. There's a moment of silence. "Amir," Ahmad calls down. "Yes," he replies weakly. "I'm here, but I'm not in good shape. I'm going to be honest." "Hey, it's okay," I shout, forcing my own confidence to grow, believing in hope for us, for the sake of my friends if not for myself. "We're gonna be alright, just listen." I clear my throat and the sound bounces off the pipe above me and back into my face. I raise my head to clear my ears from the water and I wince from the pain. "We need to move," I shout simply. "We cannot stay here or we'll die." Any further pressure changes and the pipe could fill with water to the brim. And regardless, sooner or later we'll use up all the oxygen and we will suffocate. So I propose this. We do our best to move. We shuffle our way along the pipe as far as we can. If we're in luck, we've been pulled north and we don't know how much distance we've already covered. Azrak 1 is 1.5 kilometers away at the max. That's a distance that we can make, I'm sure of it. "And if we've been pulled south," Amir calls. To this, I remain silent. The sound of something low and deep reverberates along the pipe. Then shakily, Ahmad replies, "Alright, Kedar, I'm with you. We do this. We crawl our way along the pipe and we pray." "Amir," I call down, "what do you think?" He coughs and groans. "Kedar," he says, "look, I can barely move. I can't do this." "You can," Ahmad shouts out. "You can." "No, Ahmad." Amir groans again. "My injuries are bad. I can't move more than an inch. I'm going to have to wait behind." "We can't leave you behind." Ahmad splutters, but Amir interrupts. "Go," he says. "And once you've escaped, you'll know where to find me. Just go, all right. You said yourselves the clock's ticking. So go." I hesitate and then release a long and shuddering sigh. "God save you, brother," I call down. "We'll be back, I promise. We won't leave you." "I know," he says, his voice distant and quiet. "God," I mutter angrily, slamming my fist against the pipe. "Ahmad, are you ready?" There's a pause. "Yes," he says. "I'm right behind you, Kadar. Let's do this." And so we begin our venture. Excruciatingly claustrophobic does not even begin to cover it. The knowledge that beyond these narrow confines is nothing more than the great weight of the ocean does not fill me with bravery. Every inch that we travel requires an exertion. I find little to no leverage on the wet, slippery, and oil-soaked base of the pipe, so I have to find the slightest and narrowest of grooves, mostly around the upper half, and press my toes or heels into them, using my one good hand and my one broken hand to help force myself along through the sloshing, sinister waters. I can see nothing. There is no level of light at all for my eyes to adjust to, so in pitch darkness we remain. As we move, I try my best to keep track of the distance traveled. My estimate, I think, is reasonable after 2 or 3 meters. After 10, my grasp is feeble, and beyond that I simply lose track. It's impossible to tell. We just keep shuffling our way down the pipe, listening to the sounds of our breathing, occasionally calling down to each for reassurance, Ahmad and I, slowly and steadily through this underwater pipe, inch by agonizing inch. It's tough to tell how much time passes, but after around 20 minutes, I make a disturbing discovery. It was gradual at first, so gradual that I did not notice, but there is now a significant stress placed on the back of my neck. I'm having to hold my face as high as I can, and my forehead has been pressed against the metal for a while now. It is only when I have to alter the shape of my lips to inhale the air that I realize we're running out. I suppress a wave of panic and I stop moving at once, shuffling back the way that I came to give myself a little more airspace to work with. Water sloshes in my ears and obscures my hearing, but I call down to Ahmad. "Ahmad," I call. "Can you hear me?" "Yes," he shouts back, coughing. "Everything all right?" "Ahmad," I falter. "Ahmad, we're about to run out of air." There's a pause. "What do you mean?" he asks, his voice higher and more anxious. "I mean the air pocket is about to expire." Another pause. "Maybe there's another one further down. I've seen the schematics of the pipe. The undulations are not regular, so there could be another pocket." "But what if there isn't?" I shout back, chest now rising and falling desperately. God. There is no space, no light. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. "Get a hold of yourself," Ahmad shouts, and it cuts through the madness. I seize hold of his words and allow them to anchor me. "We can do this, brother." I take a deep breath. "All right," I say. "All right, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna move as fast as I can along the pipe. I'll hold my breath and I'll search for an air pocket. Regardless of whether I do or don't, I'll be back to let you know, okay?" "You're a brave man," calls the voice of Ahmad. "Don't overdo it, good luck." "Okay," I say, heart pounding. I begin to take a series of slow and deep breaths, gently and gradually expanding my lungs, preparing them to hold for as long as they're able. The sound is cold and eerie in the darkness. Steady and deep breaths. My chest rises and falls. I shuffle back along the pipe, my face pressed against the pipe, the air metallic and oily and grim. I can't hear anything now. The water comes all the way up to the sides of my lips. Shaking, I press my hands against the sides, doing my best to ignore the pain shooting through my right hand wrist. "Here we go, Kadar." I take my final breath in, my lungs filled to their maximum capacity, and I brace myself against the pipe, using my hands and feet to push myself further along. The air is lost and I'm completely submerged beneath the water. It forms a constant, steady roaring rumble in my ears. I use anything that I can to increase the distance that I'm able to move. My elbows, my knees, heels, my shoulders. I use them all to search for leverage. Inch by inch, faster than before, I force myself through the pipe. My heart pounds. The beat is loud, so loud. My chest trembles, but I keep moving as far as I can. Inch by inch, inch by inch. Don't panic. If you don't find air, then there's really nothing for us. We'll suffocate or drown or worse in the belly of the pipe, and we may never be discovered. I have to keep moving, inch by inch. My hands reach a particularly oily section of the pipe, and instead of pressing against the sides, they slip right off. In a blink, my momentum is lost, and I fumble and splutter in terror as I realize that my means of propulsion have now failed me. No, I think with flashes of terrible urgency. No. Bubbles unseen escape from my lips as I writhe in the darkness, suffocating in the cold embrace of the rusted beast. Please, I beg, sending up prayers to a god that I have neglected, desperately searching for a workable surface. My foot finds a subtle groove and I'm able to push myself another inch, and from there I'm able to move another. My journey continues, but I am rewarded with no relief, because soon I will need to breathe in. My lungs have already begun to ache, and if I don't find another pocket of air, then I'll have to return through the pipe, back the way that I came, back past these slippery and oily walls. What if I get stuck on the way back? What if I don't get back in time? How the heck was this allowed to happen? I am overcome with a sudden burst of rage, and bubbles spill through my clenched teeth as I force myself deeper and deeper through the water. As hastily as I'm able, my lungs start to burn. I'm going to run out of air. Just a little further, I can surge a little further. I'm going to run out of air and I'm going to die. Just a little further. I can do it. I know I can do it. And with a sudden gasp and a great shuddering breath inwards, I almost laugh in desperate thankfulness as the angle of the pipe is subtly changed, and I feel my face emerge into a fresh new pocket of air. It is not fresh, of course, but in that moment it's the sweetest air that I've ever tasted. I come to a stop and allow some great and rasping breaths, filling and replenishing my lungs. Thank God, is all that I can murmur, over and over. Thank God, I calm myself. And once I have my breath, I try shouting. I don't think that he'll be able to hear me, but I try anyway. I receive no response, so I try knocking a rhythm on the pipe. There is still no response, so regretfully, I prepare for the return journey. I'm scared, of course, but I now know that it can be done, that there is air waiting safely for me on the other side. So I fill my lungs once again and shuffle back through the pipe, feet first this time back towards Ahmad's location. I use the material of my diving suit to help me pass by the oily section, and I emerge back into the former pocket, spluttering and coughing. Oh, good Lord, Ahmad shouts. Kadar, you took your time. I thought you might have. It's all right, I reply. We can make it. There's another pocket ahead. Now listen. And I go on to explain the distance and what he'll need to do. And then finally, for the third and hopefully final time, we force ourselves through the watery darkness, back beneath and through the pipe, with the promise of the next air pocket, our guiding light. Inch by inch, as fast as I can, praying that Ahmad is able to keep up. And then as before, my face emerges into the new air pocket, but I continue moving along to allow space for Ahmad. The seconds pass, and just as I'm beginning to fret, I hear his coughing, the sound of great lungfuls of swallowed air as he breathes it in. Yes, I shout, banging my good fist on the pipe. We did it, brother. Yes, he splutters. Yes, we did. And then he releases what sounds like a laugh, and it fills my heart with hope. "Come on," I shout to him. "Let's keep on going." And so we do, on our journey through the pipe. Inch by inch as the hours pass by, the timeless hours in the perpetual watery darkness. My joints ache, my muscles are tense and throb with exertion, but I have to keep going. There's nothing else for it. Our air pocket comes to an end, and as with before, I scout ahead. I have to, of course, as there's simply no way possible for Ahmad to pass me by. After holding my breath for another painful period of time, I am blessed with the discovery of a new breathable space, and so we continue in the same manner. These air pockets, however, grow shorter and shorter as we progress, much to my quiet alarm, but there's still just enough, and so our journey continues. Every time that I have to hold my breath and go on ahead, it is a cruel exercise in willpower and mental strength, but I do my duty. I have to. We have to get out. We have to get out. An exhausting struggle through the pipe comes to a temporary halt as we reach an air pocket, a mere 3 or 4 meters in length. I start with fright as my bad shoulder knocks up against something hard and cold. It moves a little in response to the pressure that I exert upon it, so it isn't a blockage of any kind. Could it be? My heart leaps. Wriggling, squirming in the pipe, I do my best to bring my good hand up towards my head. It is not a quick process and requires some uncomfortable maneuvers, but eventually my hand can reach my neck and beyond, and my fingers explore the mysterious object. Despite everything, a grin spreads across my face and I cry out loud with joy. "Ahmad!" I shout. "Ahmad, I found a tank. I think, yes, it's all connected. It's all here." "A tank?" he replies. "What do you mean?" "I mean an oxygen tank, Ahmad. It's all in one piece. The breathing tube, yes, it's all here." "That's fantastic," he exclaims. "How many are there?" My enthusiasm drops. I shuffle further down the pipe, searching blindly in the darkness for evidence of a potential second set of diving gear. Despite my silent pleas, however, there's only one. "I can only find one here," I tell my comrade. "But there might be another one further down. This is a game changer. We can do this. We can get out." "Whose tank is it, Kedar?" Ahmad asked me. I think my own was about half full. "Yes, likewise," I reply. "What about Amir's?" "Amir's," Ahmad begins hesitating. "Kedar, I think that Amir's was almost empty." I take a deep breath. "Right," I reply. "Well, still, this will help. I'll use it now and I'll see if I can find another set a little further along. Wish me luck." "Good luck, man," Ahmad says. "Godspeed." I check the tank over as best I can. I hold the mouthpiece around my lips, giving it a few test breaths, and then on I go. Back beneath the water, though this time armed with the tank to help me along my way, I grunt and shift my body around, shuffling through the pipe, squirming my way along, and I find what will come to be the final air pocket of its type. A mere meter long, not even big enough for Ahmad and I to share at the same time. And to my growing frustration, there's no sign of a second tank. And so I push deeper, onwards through the pipe, breathing with the tank, pushing it along with me as I go. I discover to my bitter amusement what could well be my second missing flipper, but there is still no second tank, and no further air pockets either. Clenching my fist, I realize that I need to go back before Ahmad starts worrying. So I make the painstaking return journey, in a time that to my friend must feel like hours. But at last, I return to our shared location and inform him of the disappointing news. He is quiet as I relay my findings, and then he says in a soft voice, "Kedar, I think that this is the end of the road for me. There's no use in me going any further. I think that I'll have to wait here." I begin to protest, but my words die in my mouth. I mean, what is there for me to say? He's right, of course. It's a harsh truth, but he's absolutely right. He'll simply have to stay behind. The next leg of the journey I'll have to do alone. A sudden rush of emotion swells up inside me and I force it back down. There's a time and a place. I try not to consider the fact that this may be the last time that I'll ever hear his voice. Perhaps I've heard both of their voices for the very last time. No, time and a place, keep moving. Ahmad, I begin, fumbling for some words that'll do the moment justice, but he interrupts. See you soon, buddy, he says in the dark. I'm not able to reply immediately, but when I do, I say to him, yes, for sure. See you soon, buddy. And with that, I'm gone. I force myself further along the tank, crawling and shuffling, and I'm submerged. My breathing is loud through the tube connected to my mouth, and when I reach the final air pocket, I allow myself a second to pause, to steel my constitution, and then this pocket too was left behind. On I go, underwater. The rest of my journey will be underwater, and since I cannot see, there's no way to tell how much air is left in the tank. If it was mine or Ahmad's, then I should have hours to spare. If it was Amir's, well, no point in being coy. If it's Amir's, then I'll likely die down here, unless I'm blessed with another surprise air pocket. It's not impossible, I tell myself as I crawl through the pipe. Water all around me, it's not impossible. And yet as the hours go by, there are no more air pockets to discover, just more pipe. The endless, claustrophobic dark of the tunnel. How far have I come? No idea, it's impossible to tell really, and I don't even know which way I'm heading. If it's north, then there's hope. If south, then this whole venture was pointless anyway. I'll never make it to Azrak 2. Azrak 1, on the other hand, for Azrak 1, hope remains. There's still hope. Onwards through the pipe. Through the oily and poisoned water, my elbows burn with pain from the friction. My shoulders have been rubbed raw, my feet are developing painful blisters from the places that I've been forced to press them against the pipe for leverage, over and over. And my neck is killing me. It hurts to turn my head too far in either direction. I just grit my teeth and keep on going. It's too late to stop now, I must keep going. On and on and on. God give me strength, I mutter to myself as my muscles contract and sting. Give me strength to see this through. Thinking about Ahmad, about Amir, all alone just like me, it helps propel me forwards. I can't give up, not while they're counting on me. I could never do that. I could never do that to them, not ever. And so on I go. Endless, ceaseless dark. Endless, ceaseless torture of the pipe. Except it's not endless. Not as luck would have it. The good news regarding my oxygen tank is that it definitely wasn't Amir's. If it was, it would have expired by now. The bad news is that I've been needing deeper and deeper breaths to fill my lungs. And soon the oxygen that the tank can spare me just won't be enough. It won't go on forever. I have found no other tanks along my journey. It's just the one on my person currently, and then that's it. Game over. Come on, you pipe. I hiss through the mouthpiece. You can't go on forever, you can't. And of course it doesn't. My head bashes against hard metal. Huh? I murmur in confusion. I try to continue on along my journey, but the way is blocked. I simply cannot go any further. My first thought is one of panic. I fear that I have reached some kind of wall in the pipe, one that shouldn't exist. That I've come all this way to find nothing more than a dead end. Upon a little inspection, however, I realize that a space has opened up above my head. I squirm around, and for the first time in hours and hours, I'm able to change positions and to sit upright. My back cracks and a rush of unbelievable relief and muscle tension flows through me. I bring up my hands to feel around me in the darkness, and I almost shout for joy. The pipe has reached its end. It's going up now, vertically, up through the sea towards the surface. We came north, I laugh, the cracks of hope widening, flowing into me like rivers of silver. We've been traveling north the whole time. The end of the pipe. Upwards now, upwards to the installation at Azrak 1, into salvation. Unless I take stock and consider the choice that now faces me. If I'm going to push onwards, then this really is it. It's a coin flip for life or death. There's not much air left in the tank, and if I climb this pipe to discover the worst, if this pipe has been stoppered or plugged, then definitively for me, there will be no way out. I really will reach a dead end. All hope will be lost and I'll drown down here with nowhere to go. No way forwards and no way back. I shake my head. There's no choice here, not really. It's all willpower. I don't have enough air in my tank to get back to Ahmad even if I wanted to. It's only forwards, forwards and upwards. Alright, I murmur, bubbles spilling. Here we go. And I begin my slow and deliberate ascent. Back pressed against the pipe behind me, knees and calves against the pipe in front. Up I go, kicking at times, half swimming, half shimmying up the pipe to the surface, slowly but surely, grimacing through the strain and the pain. And still it's so dark, so unbelievably dark. The lack of light does not fill me with confidence. If the pipe was not stoppered, surely I would be able to see some light, right? I open my eyes in the water. The salt and the oil stings like crazy, but I need to see, or try to see at the least. But there's nothing. There's no hint of light at all. And don't lose faith, I tell myself, screwing my eyes tight shut again. Just keep going. This vertical section of the pipe is unlike the one that we were sucked down. This part here goes all the way up to the surface, up to the bustle and the relative commotion of Azrak 1. Except it won't be bustling right now, of course. I hesitate, taking a deep strained breath through the mouthpiece, grunting with the strain. Thinking about it, the place could be entirely deserted. I don't even know what time it is. I've been crawling through the pipe for hours upon hours. I'm not sure of the exact time, but I'm exhausted. I'm starving and my oxygen is about to expire. If I recall correctly, in fact, the site won't even be open tomorrow. I rack my brains and try to remember. When are they all off-site? Was it tomorrow or was it the day after? What if everybody's gone back to shore? What if the site's empty and what if nobody's there to hear me? What if the pipe is stoppered? What if? I bellow in frustration and continue my ascent. Each breath becomes hard work. I'm starting to feel lightheaded, but there's nowhere to go but up. And this section of the pipe can't be longer than 80 meters or so. So surely if it was open I would see the light, right? Wouldn't I see the light? Please, I whisper, as I open my eyes again, squinting through the darkness. Terrified that at any second I'll hit a barrier or a stopper, and my journey will come to an abrupt and bitter end. Any second, at any moment, I could strike the ceiling and I'll be trapped. In the very next second, I emerge from the water. I hear the sounds of splashing as my head breaks free of the surface of water. I'm still in complete darkness, but I've reached the top. Air. I pull off the mouthpiece and suck it all down, refilling my lungs with far greater ease and rubbing and brushing the oily water from my face and eyes. I made it, I said to no one in particular, my voice echoing around the narrow little space afforded me. But now I have come to perhaps the final hurdle. How cruel would it be, I think, how cruel to make it so far and then to be denied rescue. So close and yet so far. I squirm and bring up my good arm with my good hand. I reach it up above me, feeling through the darkness as the water spills and drips from my elbow. A few inches above my head, I feel the lid of the pipe screwed tight shut. My heart starts pounding again. Come on, please, please. I search desperately for a release mechanism or a valve that will open the pipe from the inside. But alas, just as I had suspected, there is no such valve. I bring up my other hand and try to force open the lid. I try to spin it to shift it, but nothing works, nothing at all. And there will be no one on the other side. I mean, why would there be? Their shift is over. They'll have all left the site by now, crossed back to the shore. I'm stuck. After everything, I'm just as trapped as Amir and as Ahmad. I start pounding desperately on the lid. I bang on the pipe as hard as I can and I start to scream. I start shouting, though the sounds will be muffled. From the outside, my shouts for help will sound just like a load of moaning and groaning, potentially even mistaken for the general rumble of the pipe itself. "Help!" I scream, slamming both my fists in the metal with all my remaining force, caring not for these spikes of pain that shoot through my broken wrist. Panic threatens to overtake me, now at this final stage of my journey. "Help!" I cry, slamming the lid and kicking the pipe, making as much noise as I'm able to before my constitution breaks. "Anyone!" I roar into the darkness, and with the sound of a great and sudden grinding directly above my head, the lid shifts and a curved crack of light spills blindingly into the pipe. I gasp with astonishment, the wind taken from my sails, and I slump back down into the water with a splash. My eyes are forced closed, and the world beyond my sealed eyelids is a dazzling orange red. I don't even know what to say. I'm too afraid to believe what is happening. I sense somebody talking to me, their voices confused and alarmed, and they grab me by the diving suit by the shoulders, and with some considerable degree of effort, they haul me out and onto the platform that surrounded the pipe's exit. I'm unable to help myself from weeping. I still cannot see, but the tears streak the salt and the oil from my face. I have never felt so free. I turn and wince and stretch my arms and legs in ways that they were unable to for what felt like ages. I feel a hand squeeze my shoulder. A bottle of cool, refreshing, and above all clean water is gently poured over my face. "Cater," comes a familiar voice. "Cater, what on earth?" He fumbles for words. "Care to explain yourself, Cater? What is this?" I finally manage to open my eyes, just a sliver, gradually painfully adjusting to the light from the flood lamps all around. And I'm greeted by the sight of the only employee still at his station, long after his shift had come to an end. He stares at me, his scruffy red hair and his beard a mess, his expression almost comical in its confusion. A dry chuckle escapes my lips. "Hello, Zahir," I mutter. "You know, I don't think I've ever been happier to see anyone in my entire life." And this, my friends, is the truth. The hours that followed passed by in a whirlwind. The company and the authorities were alerted immediately, and the helicopters were sent up into the sky, and rescue boats were out in the water within the hour. The ruined habitat site was investigated and safely secured. Multiple teams of divers were sent down, and they traversed the entire length of the pipe away into the night, knocking and tapping on the metal and hunting diligently for Amir and Ahmad. There was tragically no response. I remember pacing up and down in one of the control rooms, fielding calls from family in the presence of several officers and officials, as the pressure in the pipe was carefully leveled, as it was disconnected at the safest point and opened for inspection. I remember the way that I reacted when I was told the news the next morning. After a long and sleepless night, my arm bandaged. I remember the breath escaping me, and I remember collapsing into the nearest chair. "That's impossible," I murmured. There's no way." But the bodies of Amir and Ahmad were discovered together, about 10 or so meters north from where we were suckered down. It was ruled that the two men had died on impact within the pipe, almost instantaneously. It's likely they weren't even aware of what had happened. Their last conscious moments, I'm told, most probably took place in the habitat itself before the disaster. To this I say nothing. I simply look out the window as the morning sun reflects and glimmers, sparkling in the gentle waves of the sea far below.